Story 1.
My cheating wife asked for an open marriage to justify her affair with my best friend. I left them. I was packing for our annual fishing trip, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. This trip, a long-standing tradition with my closest friends, felt different this year. Normally, it was a group affair with us and our wives, a testament to our inseparable bond since grade school. However, changes were afoot. Kenny had to miss the initial part of the trip due to a business obligation, causing his wife Pam to also delay her participation. Then Don had to cut his trip short for a meeting, leading his wife to stay behind. Once Becky learned that she'd be the only wife on the trip from the start, she opted not to join either. The alteration in plans was a letdown. Our trips were known for strengthening our friendships and spicing up our marriages, filled with laughter and memorable moments. Now it seemed like a shadow of its usual self. Despite my excitement for the trip, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss, particularly missing the intimate moments with Becky. Yet, the week leading up to the trip, Becky and I shared a passionate connection, a fervor that was both exhausting and deeply cherished. It was a bittersweet prelude to an altered tradition. For most of the year, our intimate life had settled into a routine that could be described as more functional than exciting, happening maybe twice a week. This was enough to meet our basic needs, but lacked the fiery passion we had in the early days of our marriage. Back then, our desire for each other was relentless, and we took advantage of every moment and place we could find for intimacy. However, about 5 years ago, this intensity began to wane, and our frequent encounters became less frequent, dwindling to just a few times a week. Becky seemed more and more reluctant, leading to frustration and occasional arguments on my part. Over time, though, I came to terms with this shift in our relationship, learning to handle my disappointment on my own. This context was on my mind that Thursday evening as I sat in the den trying to relax with a beer after finishing my packing. Becky was upstairs putting the kids to bed, a routine that had become as much a part of our lives as our changed intimate dynamics. After a while, I heard her footsteps as she came back down and went into the kitchen. She then joined me in the den, a glass of wine in her hand and a look of concern on her face. "Honey," she began, her voice laced with seriousness, "we need to have an important talk. I understand this might upset you, but please hear me out before responding. I promise to address any questions you have afterward. I should have brought this up months ago, but I needed to gather some information first." Her tone was earnest, hinting at the gravity of what she was about to share. I'm not sure why, but I felt a surge of fear. Becky's demeanor was apologetic and fearful, yet her resolve was unmistakable. It was clear she was about to discuss something serious. After taking a deep breath and another large sip of her wine, she continued, "I know our intimate life hasn't been satisfying for you in the past few years, honey. Frankly, I haven't found much joy in our moments together either, Davy. I love you deeply, but, well, honey, you no longer stir the same excitement in me that you once did." She paused briefly before continuing, "And David, I want to, your wife. You're an excellent father, a fantastic provider, and a true friend, but I'm seeking more than what you can offer me physically." I could feel anger starting to boil inside me. What was she implying? I thought she had grown distant, but what was the significance of the past week? I was certain I had made a significant impact. Just as I was about to interject, Becky raised her hand. "David, you promised to let me finish speaking before you responded." I bit down hard, forcing myself to lean back into my chair, trying to temper my rising frustration as she went on. "David, there's someone I've known for a while who captivates me in a way I cannot ignore. It's not just about sex. No, it's about making love in a way that I feel we can't anymore. I didn't want to go behind your back. I will still be here for you, but I need to be honest about my needs. Being with him makes me feel alive, reminiscent of how we felt at the beginning of our marriage. It's something I can't seem to get enough of." I jumped from my chair and began screaming at her, "You cheating witch! How could you?" Becky stood and jumped in front of me. She pushed me back and I fell into my chair. She stood over me and continued, "Shut up. I told you that you wouldn't like what I had to say, but you promised to listen to me before you said anything. Now shut up and listen." I found myself rooted to the spot, stunned, as Becky loomed over me, her gaze fierce with a determination I had never seen before. She went on, her words like a cold, unwelcome breeze. "I've spoken with Dawn about the divorce laws here, and you need to understand the reality. Divorcing me won't be in your favor. You'd end up losing significantly. I'd be entitled to a large portion of your income for alimony and child support. The courts would likely grant me custody of the kids and the house to ensure their stability. Half of our savings and your retirement fund would also be mine. You'd be left with barely enough to live on, let alone maintain the lifestyle you're accustomed to. It would mean our children growing up in a broken home, dealing with all the associated difficulties. For your sake and for the kids, you need to come to terms with my decision. Despite everything, I still hold love and respect for you. Our life won't change much on the surface. I'm not cutting you off entirely, it's just that I'll be absent now and then, maybe even taking trips with him for the time we need together. As her words sank in, a mix of disbelief and anger welled up inside me. Watching Becky return to her seat, a silence fell over the room, heavy and tense. After a moment, I managed to find my voice, a mix of hurt and outrage barely contained. I can't believe this. How could you do this after everything? To come to me with such a betrayal. How long has this been going on? Who is he? Becky looked at me with some anger and said, "Using mean words won't solve anything, honey. I hope you can move past your feelings, and we can continue living as we have for the past few years. I won't tell you how long this has been going on, or when or where it happens. And I definitely won't tell you who I'm intimate with. It's none of your business, and if I catch you snooping around, I'll have to take actions you won't like. I've been seeing someone else, and I'm done hiding it. I need to be honest because the sneaking around is too much. I want to be upfront about when I go out so you can take care of the kids, but I won't tell you who he is to avoid trouble. If you try to do something bad to him or me, it won't end well, especially for our kids who need you. Just know, if you try to hurt us, there will be consequences." Once again, I sat there, shocked at how calmly Becky laid out her information. She seemed so sure, so prepared. It was clear she had been planning this moment for a while. Despite my thoughts and comments, she had an answer for everything I said. I should probably call the guys and let them know I won't be going on this trip. We need to sort some things out, and I have a lot on my plate. I reached for my phone, but Becky grabbed my hand. Becky looked me straight in the eyes and said, "No. You're going on this trip. The kids will stay with your parents as we arranged. I don't plan on being alone for the next 2 weeks, and I don't want you around to cause any trouble or try to find out who I'll be with. You need this time away to process everything. I've made sure you'll actually go on this trip, and you won't like the consequences if you don't. You'll regret it if you change your plans now. My friends and I have everything covered. We have sources in town and almost everywhere you might go. If you try anything to find out about my lover or disrupt our lives, I'll find out, and you'll face serious consequences. You have to accept that my plan is solid, and it's what's best for me. If you cooperate, I'll make sure you don't have a miserable life. You'll continue living much like you have been." Becky went over to the desk and took out a thick envelope from her drawer of papers. She came back to me and handed it over. "Here, so you'll believe me. We made a written report of all your actions for the past month. Read it, and you'll see we have it all down. We're aware of everything you do, and if you try to interfere with our plan, we'll know, and I won't go easy on you. Now, I'm heading to bed. If you want some action tonight, come up. You'll see not much has to change unless you start causing trouble." I sat there in shock. Who was this woman, and what happened to my wife? I thought I knew her, but now I discover she's conniving and unfaithful. I watched her go upstairs, her hips swaying seductively. She knew she looked amazing, and she was using it tonight. But for once, it didn't faze me at all. Finally, I opened the envelope and started reading. I was shocked. The report on me was incredibly detailed, capturing things I'd forgotten until I read them. It seemed like someone had been monitoring my every move, noting even minor incidents like spilling something on my shirt. It documented my glances at other women, something natural for anyone. The thoroughness of the report made me wonder if someone wealthy or connected was behind it, given its detail and scope. The report contained private details, including conversations I thought were private. This made me question if I was being bugged. As I considered my next steps, particularly how to leave my cheating wife without losing out in a divorce, I realized I needed advice. My lifelong friends, who shared a complicated history with me and Becky, seemed like the go-to. But then a dreadful thought struck me. What if Becky was involved with one of them? Seeking their counsel could backfire if the traitor was among them, sabotaging my plans before they even started. Just as I was deep in thought, Becky called out from the top of the stairs, provocatively suggesting I join her in bed rather than mulling over things alone. She then returned to our bedroom, leaving me to consider my next move in this complex situation. I never did go to bed. I spent the night on the couch in the den. Becky woke me up when she started making breakfast. She was mad and made sure I knew it. "Get your sorry butt up, Dave. You need to clean up and get ready for work before the kids notice you didn't sleep in your own room last night. When you come back in 2 weeks, I expect you to act normal. If you mess things up in the family, I've already warned you about the consequences. I'm willing to meet your needs sometimes, but I expect you to do your part too. Just so you know, if you find another woman, I'm filing for divorce." I could feel the rage building up inside me. I yelled, "What's going on? You can mess around and think it's fine, but I can't do the same? Not that I want to, but why is it okay for you and not for me?" Becky smirked and said, "Come on, Dave. We both know you're satisfied with what you're getting from me. Now, if you go out looking for someone else, it's just to get back at me. I only seek outside the marriage because you're not meeting my needs as a husband. If you could give me what I need, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere, and I expect the same from you." I stammered. I was so mad I could barely talk, but I finally managed to respond. "I can't believe this. You never once talked to me about needing more or wanting to try something different in bed. You never asked me to do anything we don't normally do. How was I supposed to know you wanted something else if you never told me? I always made sure you were satisfied. Most of the time you had multiple orgasms before we were done. How could I know something was missing when you acted like everything was fine and I was happy?" Becky stood there, then said, "Well, if you're asking now, you're really clueless, huh? It's not just about quantity, dear, it's about quality. You never learned how to please me, and I realized you never would. So I started getting what I needed elsewhere. Now get dressed. I'm tired of hearing you complain." I went upstairs and went through my usual morning routine. We had a quiet breakfast, and when our son Sean asked what was wrong, I started to explain, but Becky interrupted, saying, "Your father's just dealing with a little issue. He'll be fine after his vacation." She shot me a glare before focusing on her breakfast. At work, I decided to ignore some of Becky's advice and cancel my trip with the guys. We were supposed to leave straight from work and meet at our favorite Denny's to drive together. I had a spacious F-150 truck, so we'd load our gear into it. Roger would ride with me, and Don would take his car since he had to return on Wednesday. I talked to Roger, explaining that something had come up and I couldn't make it. I offered to let him use my truck to haul the gear. Roger exclaimed, "Oh, Dave, that's not happening. I just spoke to Becky, and she warned me you might try this. She mentioned you've been stressed lately, but she checked with your secretary and confirmed you have nothing important scheduled. I promised her I'd ensure you take this trip. If I have to, I'll come find you. You're coming with us, and you're going to enjoy yourself." I started to object and refuse outright, but then I felt a twinge of fear. What if Roger was? No, Becky said she was leaving this weekend, and Roger was joining me. But wait, Tenny was staying home and coming up midweek. Could it be him, or someone else? I was stuck. I needed to think more and make plans. I wanted to buy some surveillance equipment, but how? From the report I read, Becky and her friends tracked my credit card purchases, phone calls, and even cash withdrawals. They could spot unusual spending overnight. I was sitting at my desk, lost in thought, when Becky called. As soon as I answered, she launched into a tirade. "David, I told you to go on your trip, and it's not wise for you to try to snoop into my affairs. Roger just informed me that you tried to back out. This is your final warning. Don't mess with me, or you'll lose everything and never see your children again. Do you understand?" This time, she hung up abruptly, leaving me stunned once again. Roger had betrayed me. Did that mean he was involved, or was he genuinely concerned for me? Come to think of it, my old friends didn't seem as close as they used to be. It felt like they were now Becky's friends, and I was just tagging along. Could it be? Nah, not all of them anyway. I decided to go on the trip and met the guys at Denny's. While they were joking around, I sat gloomily. Finally, Don asked me what was wrong. I hesitated for a moment, then said, "Becky has some crazy idea, and I don't know how to deal with it." I can hardly believe she meant what she said, but if she did, my marriage is in trouble. Roger glanced at Don and remarked, "You know Becky's style, Don. She rang me up earlier today saying Loverboy here was trying to bail on our trip. She mentioned he's been on edge and hard to deal with lately and could use this time off to clear his head. I assured her we'd ensure he joined us and had a good time." Don chimed in, "Yeah, I've noticed his moodiness too. Over the past few months, he hasn't been as lively with us. A little adjustment in attitude won't hurt, and we can help with that. I've got beer and his favorite whiskey in my car." Turning to me, he added, "Nothing used to stop us from enjoying our cabin time. Sure, the ladies won't be there this time, but hey, more drinks and stories for us." We headed out, driving to the fishing spot by the stream. It was a short 2-hour ride, and we arrived in time for some serious drinking before bed. The next morning, both guys insisted on fishing, so we set off. The fishing helped me forget about the past few days, but thoughts of Becky crept back as we returned to the cabin. I couldn't believe she meant what she said, but it lingered in my mind. Instead of focusing on what I needed to do, I let the guys convince me to keep drinking with them. Later, during supper, as we continued drinking, Don looked at me and asked, "Okay, Dave, spill it. You look like you lost your best buddy, but I'm still here. What's eating you? I thought, why not? If I didn't talk to someone I trusted, I'd lose it. These guys were trustworthy. We'd been pals since school started. I spilled the beans to Don and Roger about my marriage's declining bed life over the last 3 years and Becky's bombshell from Thursday evening. After I finished, Don looked at me and said, "Wow, Dave, are you sure that's what Becky said? I can't believe she'd even think something like that. We've known her for years and she's the sweetest, most caring woman I know." "Yeah, I know, but that's exactly what she said as far as I recall." "Is it really true?" Don leaned back and said, "Well, Dave, I can't predict the outcome of a divorce, but she's right about some things. If she's really doing what you say, you have to decide how to handle it. If she's discreet, you need to consider if breaking up the family and the emotional toll on the children, you and Becky, is worth it. In custody battles, the courts usually favor the mother unless she's proven unfit. You'd likely lose custody of your kids. It's true you'd have to financially support them until they're grown, including college expenses. Because she doesn't work, you'd have to pay alimony until she remarries. You might lose your home, either giving it to her or selling it and splitting the money. You'd also have to share your savings and retirement funds. Child support is calculated by a formula that heavily burdens the supporting parent. Expect to lose a big chunk of your income for child support. You'd also need to provide health care for the kids." Dave was stunned, hearing his attorney friend lay out the situation. It was even worse than Becky warning him about the consequences of her infidelity. "I have to know. She won't tell me whom she is with, and I need to know. When I find out, I will make sure she isn't with him any longer." "Dave, as your friend, I get where you're coming from," Don replied. "But as a court officer, I have to advise against that. It's tough, but I'm obligated to report these things. If harm comes to any of Becky's lovers, I'll have to report you. My suggestion? Just deal with it and keep things normal. Maybe if she's cheating, she'll change her mind or get it out of her system. Either way, it seems like sticking to the status quo would be better for you."
"Don, I can't believe you're saying this."
"How would you feel if Shell did something like that and threatened you? Would you just accept her cheating, like Becky expects me to?" Dave asked, incredulous. Don looked uneasy. "No, I'd probably be as upset as you are, but I trust Shell wouldn't do that. She loves me and knows I'm the best partner she could have. I provide for our family, and she wouldn't risk losing that or hurting our kids. Or me. Buddy, you should just accept your situation. If Becky's as vigilant as you say, based on that report, you're in trouble. If you try to investigate her affair, she'll find out and retaliate. Heck, she might even know about this conversation if she's monitoring you closely. Did she know where we were going?" "Shoot, I didn't even think about that. Darn it, now I have more to worry about," Dave muttered, feeling even more confused by Roger's constant smile and Don's oddly happy expression during their conversation. He couldn't believe his friends were so relaxed about Becky treating him badly. Finally, he sighed. "Well, forget it. Let's just have some more drinks." The next morning, Dave woke up before his friends, feeling the need for solitude. He grabbed his fishing gear and headed upstream to his favorite spot. Just as he was about to start fishing, his cell phone rang. He always kept it with him, although reception was spotty in some areas due to weak signals. He was surprised to get reception here. Seeing it was Becky calling, he chose not to answer. After Becky left a message, he listened to it. He was shocked to hear her say, "Well, honey, my sources say you got some good advice from Don last night. I hope you're going to follow it. I love you, and you're too good of a provider and father to lose, but if you do something foolish, I can manage the kids without you. Now have fun." Dave stared at the phone in disbelief. He knew the cabin didn't have cell service and there was no landline, so how did she find out about his conversation with the guys? Oh no, his gear must be bugged, and someone must be nearby to pick up the transmission. He needed to search for it later. Dave didn't notice Roger and Don standing at the edge of the trees while he listened to the message. They grinned, gave each other a thumbs up, then vanished back into the woods, heading towards the cabin. Roger glanced at Don and asked, "You think that'll do it, or should we keep the pressure on for a bit?" "I reckon we should keep those detailed reports going for a month or two. And we've got to keep urging him to just accept it," Don replied. "We've got a good thing happening now. If we can persuade him to let Becky keep fooling around and spend some full nights and weekends with us, we'll be way ahead. Imagine how much better it'll be to have longer sessions with her, without any time constraints. She's so hooked on what we give her in bed that she'll do anything we say just to have more. If we play it smart, he can clue in our wives about the issue, and we can tell them we're out at night helping him figure out what's going on. That'll be solid cover." Dave fished until nearly noon, but his mind wasn't on it. He spent most of his time pondering his marriage, trying to figure out how to uncover Becky's affair, end it, and get back at her. However, he knew he couldn't do anything until he found out who, when, where, and why, if possible. On a cozy Friday evening, as the anticipation of their friend's arrival grew, Becky and the man beside her shared a warm, intimate moment. After spending the day preparing for a weekend at the cabin, they finally had some time to themselves. Becky, feeling playful and affectionate, approached him with a twinkle in her eye. She handed him a drink and sat close, their conversation flowing easily. The atmosphere was charged with excitement for the weekend ahead. They shared laughs, reminisced about past adventures, and eagerly discussed plans for the days to come. As they sat together, the connection between them deepened. Becky, feeling bold, leaned in for a tender kiss, which he warmly reciprocated. Their affectionate exchange soon turned into a gentle caress as they continued to express their fondness for each other. Becky, feeling the warmth of the moment, whispered sweet nothings into his ear. The air was filled with anticipation, not just for the immediate tenderness they shared, but also for the joy that the coming days with their friends would bring. They talked about their friend's upcoming arrival, speculating with excitement about the activities they had planned. The mention of a friend's expected visit on Wednesday added to the bubbling excitement, sparking further conversation about the adventures that awaited them. As the evening progressed, they remained close, cherishing each other's company. Their connection was a testament to their deep bond, one that was amplified by the shared joy of the imminent reunion with their close friends. In that moment, they were reminded of the simple pleasures of companionship, the anticipation of good times ahead, and the beauty of moments spent with someone special. Becky exclaimed, "Oh God, I've been craving this for so long. I can't wait for the others to arrive." "Isn't Don supposed to be here early Wednesday?" "Yeah, baby. Then you'll have both of us for 2 whole nights before I have to help babysit your loving hubby." "Oh God, I'll be so relieved when we can all 3 be together at once. Just being with 1 or 2 of you at a time has been tough. After what you've done to me, there's no way Dave alone can satisfy me anymore. Do you think we've covered everything? I adore him, and he's a wonderful provider and father. I don't want to lose him." "Yeah, I think we can keep him in check," her lover replied. "I just hope Dave doesn't start confiding in our wives and causing trouble. We've been doing fine the last 3 years. I think we should have been content with how things were, instead of getting greedy like this. Having you to ourselves all night or on a long trip sounds nice, but I'm not sure we can push Dave this hard. We might have unleashed something uncontrollable. Well, the bugs we planted and the few things we found that make him look bad should make him back off. I just wish he wasn't so straight and honorable. It's unbelievable we haven't found anything shady he's done. How can a man in business for himself not take advantage of situations to make extra cash?" He sighed, shaking his head. "Oh, by the way, Becky, are you still keeping an eye on the finances and transactions like we discussed?" "Yeah, I convinced the bank to limit his cash withdrawals, but I can't control his check writing. At least we can track them if he does. I wish I had a way to monitor the business more closely. Now I regret pushing him to hire office help so I could stay home with the kids and be a housewife." Becky chuckled, then added, "Of course, if I hadn't insisted on staying home, we wouldn't be having as much fun, would we? I was so frustrated only being with you all a couple of nights a month or on trips. Being a stay-at-home mom allowed us to play more, and now with this plan, we can play whenever we want." Dave was gloomy and preoccupied by the river. His friends attempted to chat with him and lift his spirits, but they weren't making much headway. They got him drunk on Tuesday evening. After he passed out from intoxication, Don and Roger retreated to the porch to converse quietly. Roger expressed concern, saying, "I'm starting to fret, Don. We've been talking to him for 4 days, and if anything, he's becoming more determined to leave Becky and seek revenge on her lover. He's on the brink of exploding and going wild. How are we going to manage this situation now? It all seemed so promising and simple when we planned to control him and spend more time with her. What if he finds out and tells our wives?" Don reassured him, saying, "Relax, Roger. I can manipulate him in the divorce proceedings and paint her as an angel. Even if she does divorce him, so what? We only embarked on this because she said she wanted to keep him around. I'll admit, banging her while she's married to him gives me a thrill, but she'd still be just as enjoyable if she weren't married. We just need to prevent him and our wives from discovering the truth so we don't get screwed over. We might need to resort to some physical persuasion, but let's wait and see how things unfold in a week or 2. Dave couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but he had awakened and caught snippets of their discussion on the front porch. He understood they were upset that he was stubborn about accepting Becky's infidelity, and they believed they needed to convince him to be more tolerant. Now, not only was he angry with her, but he was also angry with them. Before drifting back to sleep, he resolved to handle the situation without their assistance. Over the next few days, Dave grew more distant from his friends. Roger and Kenny grew genuinely concerned when all he would say about the situation was, "I'm going to find out who the woman is sleeping with. And both she and they are going to pay, big time." Finally, the day arrived for them to head home. Once again, Roger rode with Dave, but there was no conversation in the truck. Kenny drove his own car, and as soon as they reached an area with good cell service, he called Dawn. Dawn and Becky sat in Dave's living room and listened as Kenny reported on Dave. "He's boiling with anger. If anything, he's even more determined to make you pay than he was when I got to the cabin. I'm not sure what to do, but I think we should lay low until he calms down. If he catches us, it could get ugly." Becky sat in shock, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she was almost hyperventilating. Dawn, with clenched jaws and a red face, sat beside her. After a brief conversation with Kenny, Dawn turned to Becky. He pulled her close and began caressing her breasts to calm her down. As he touched her, he said, "Becky, don't worry. I didn't want to resort to drastic measures if we didn't have to, but it seems like we have no choice now. See how he behaves this weekend, and let me know on Sunday evening if it seems like he's going to cause trouble. We'll file on Monday. I can freeze all your personal accounts, and I believe I can freeze the business accounts pending court approval for all expenditures. We can convince the judge that he might drain your accounts and ruin the business if we don't take control." Dave came home late on Friday night and found Becky in the living room, looking upset as though she had been crying. She seemed disheveled and was only wearing one of his shirts. As Dave walked by, he noticed something odd about her appearance that made him very upset. Becky looked at him defiantly, as if provoking him with her posture. Dave was really angry and just walked by Becky without saying anything. Becky tried to follow him into their bedroom and even attempted to join him in the shower, but Dave firmly told her to leave, expressing his disappointment and anger about the situation. He told her that he had hoped they could resolve their issues, but now he felt there was no chance for that. Dave warned Becky that even though she had hurt him, he would find a way to respond to her actions and those of the person or people she was involved with. After getting himself together, Dave quickly packed his things into his truck, going back and forth from the house. While packing, he overheard Becky on the phone. One of the last things he tried to do before leaving was to transfer money from their joint bank accounts. But he discovered he was locked out because the password had been changed. This made him even more angry. Turning around, he saw Becky watching him, which only added to his frustration. Becky appeared remorseful as she spoke. "I hoped you'd come to your senses, and we wouldn't reach this point. You realize you're making a grave mistake, right? I love you more than any man I've ever known. I don't want to lose you. If you persist, you'll risk losing the business and everything we've built. Just so you're aware, I've hired Don as my lawyer. I just spoke with him and informed him of your behavior. He'll be in touch." Dave was stunned. He knew Don was also her friend, but geez, he'd been Dave's attorney since he started practicing law. He couldn't believe Don would betray him like this. Dave left his home and drove straight to his office and warehouse complex. He planned to stay in his office and conference room for a while. On the way in, he stopped at the gate and spoke to the guard. "I'm having some trouble with my wife. She and her lover have threatened me. I need you to call in extra security and keep all unauthorized persons off the property." Saturday morning, around 10 a.m., Dave was leaving the complex to grab breakfast when he got halted at the gate. A man approached him, confirmed his identity, then handed him an envelope saying, "You've been served." After the man left, Dave opened the envelope and found a restraining order. It stated that he couldn't come within 300 feet of his wife, children, or their home. Additionally, there was an order requiring court approval for any expenditures from his personal or business accounts, preventing him from depleting the company's assets before divorce proceedings, which were set to start the following Monday. After breakfast, Dave went to his assistant's house. When she opened the door, she remarked, "Dave, you look awful." "What's wrong?" "I need to talk. I need help, and you're the only person I can trust. I'm sorry to bother you on the weekend, but I'm in trouble, and I have no idea who I can trust or talk to." She stepped back and gestured for Dave to come in. "Come on in, Dave. Would you like some coffee?" Dave followed her into the kitchen, where he saw her husband, Thaddeus, sitting at the table. It seemed he had interrupted their brunch, as there were plates with eggs still on the table. "I'm sorry. I guess I should leave." Thaddeus looked up at Dave and said, "You look terrible, Dave. Sit down and talk to us, for heaven's sake." Dave slowly recounted to the couple everything that had happened in his life since 2 weeks ago Thursday. Then he expressed, "I'm at a loss for what to do now or how to help myself. My supposed best friend spent the last 2 weeks urging me to let Becky continue her affair on the side. They argue that since she's been doing it for years and I never noticed, why should I disrupt things? And now Don, my former best friend, is collaborating with Becky as her attorney, entangling me in legal complications. I can't even spend money without court approval, and I can't get that until at least Monday. My best friend has taken Becky's case, so I'm cut off there. I'm not even sure I have enough money to eat. All my credit cards were declined when I tried to pay for breakfast. Gertrude leaned back and said, "Dave, I can't believe Becky would do this to you." She turned to her husband and asked, "Thad, can't we offer him some financial assistance?" Her husband nodded in agreement. Dave sat at the table, feeling angry, helpless, and determined to seek retribution like never before. Thad pondered for a moment before stating, "If what you say is true, you need some serious help. I just hope there isn't a bug hidden in your clothes somewhere." His eyes narrowed and he added, "Come with me, Dave." They headed downstairs into the walkout basement. Stopping at the bottom of the stairs, Thad instructed, "Dave, undress right now and give me your clothes. There's a shower over there and I'll bring you some of my clothes to wear. I'll take yours to the front door after you've cleaned up. We'll talk. I doubt there's a bug in our house, but they might have followed you here and planted a listening device outside." Dave changed into some old sweatpants belonging to Thad, and then all three of them retreated into a cement storm shelter beneath the stairway. He felt foolish as he began to speak, but Thad and Gertrude stopped him. They spent the next hour communicating through written notes, planning out their course of action. After covering all possible scenarios, Thad left to contact individuals whom he believed could assist Dave. They agreed that Dave would have minimal interaction with these people, and Thad and Gertrude would lend him the necessary funds to start the investigation. While it was assumed that Becky would halt her activities, they planned to monitor her and Dave's three friends for a while. On Sunday, Dave, Thad, and Gertrude decided to catch up over lunch, enjoying each other's company and sharing laughs. At the same time, Becky hosted a meeting at her house with Don, Kenny, and Roger to discuss some pressing matters. After their meeting concluded, they all took a moment to relax and share their thoughts on the situation. Roger, looking concerned, broke the silence. "I'm feeling uneasy about all this," he admitted. "I'm not sure if it was a good idea to meet today. What if Dave finds out we were here? Maybe we should keep a low profile until we figure things out. We had a stable situation for over 3 years, and pushing the boundaries now seems risky. I'm worried this might not end well for us." He continued to share his anxieties about recent events, expressing doubt over their strategy and concern over Dave's recent activities, particularly his time spent with his secretary and her husband. Roger mentioned that their surveillance hadn't picked up anything suspicious, but he was still nervous about the potential repercussions of their actions and decisions. "Stop complaining. We've got Dave completely under control," Don said firmly. "He's unable to access any money, and we're keeping such close tabs on him that we'll know his every move before he even makes it. Right now, he's with his personal assistant and her husband, feeling sorry for himself. If he tries to leave, we'll be alerted before he's even out of sight. He can't even make a call without us knowing what he's saying, whether it's from his phone or hers." On Monday morning, Dave started searching for a new attorney to represent him. He spoke with several and scheduled appointments with 2. It was a challenge for him because Don had been his legal counsel for years, but now that Don was representing Becky, he had to find someone else. Eventually, he decided to hire Sally Hawk, who impressed him during the interview and came highly recommended. Their first course of action was to initiate legal proceedings to release Dave's business accounts and secure enough funds for his living expenses. They also opted to hire another private investigator firm to monitor Becky. Dave authorized wiretaps on his house and video surveillance. Furthermore, he gave Sally the green light to start divorce proceedings based on adultery. Later that evening, Thad handed Dave the footage captured the previous day. Naturally, Dave was devastated. Discovering that Becky was involved with all 3 of his friends only fueled his anger further. However, he now knew who he was up against. The following morning, he went to his office and made 5 copies of the CD. He distributed 1 to each of his friends' wives, 1 to his attorney, kept 1 for himself, and placed the original in a safe deposit box. Additionally, he uploaded the video to various amateur 30th sites on the internet, using the participants' real names. He set up the site as pay-per-view, with the funds directed from a PayPal account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. He smirked, realizing Don had given him a key to his office, allowing Dave to set up the site from there, implicating Don if the tracing led back. Dave also sent still images of Becky's actions to several of her friends and family members via email. He executed all of this using the free computers at the college library to avoid suspicion. Although he briefly considered using Don's office, he dismissed the idea, knowing it would appear suspicious, as Don wouldn't engage in such activities. Using the college computers was straightforward for Dave. He had done so multiple times before without getting caught. Despite the requirement of a student ID card and password for logging in, Dave often found machines left logged on, allowing him to use someone else's credentials. Moreover, the lack of CCTV security cameras at the local college meant he didn't need to worry about being captured on video in the vicinity. On Wednesday, Dave had a blast fielding phone calls from people who had watched the video. In the early afternoon, Becky called him in tears. She asked, "How could you do that? I thought you loved me. I told you it was just sex because you couldn't give me what I needed. How could you ruin my life like that?" Dave chuckled and replied, "Rebecca, I didn't ruin your life. You did. I'm just delivering the payback I promised if you went through with your plans. Frankly, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure you've been cheating on me for a while. There were plenty of times when one of the guys would make sure I was out, and I'd come home late. A lot of things that didn't add up then make sense now. By the time I'm done with you and those jerks, you'll regret ever doing this." Later that afternoon, Becky's sister called. She said, "You poor fool. Looks like you finally figured out about your oh-so-perfect wife. I assume you're the one who sent this video. Well, now it seems she and I can share the boys. I didn't know she was with them until I got this." Dave shuddered as she hung up, her maniacal laughter echoing in his mind all night. Don also called, and as soon as Dave answered, he started yelling. Dave played along. Upon realizing it was Don, he kept Don on the line for almost 15 minutes. Don made threats of both physical and legal harm, saying, "You jerk. By the time I'm through with you, you'll wish you never crossed me. I'll have your wife whenever I want, and we'll have most of your money too. If you had just done what I told her, you'd still have a family, money, and a life. After I'm done with you, I'll have the guys rough you up. I've been with that girl since high school, and I'll continue to be long after you're gone, you jerk. Enjoy living in the dumps, because that's where you'll be when I'm through. I'll file every lawsuit I can find and bleed you dry just to defend against them." Later, calls from Becky's parents were distressing. Her mother was in tears as she asked Dave, "How could you do this to Becky? I understand she hurt you deeply, but spreading pictures of her everywhere was too vengeful. Couldn't you have resolved this in a more civilized way?" By the time Dave decided to head home for the evening, he felt content with his actions so far. He was confident that the computerized answering system his company had installed would prove its worth, especially from the recordings it made that day alone. Initially, he had concerns about how his then attorney and friend, Don, had advised him to set up the system with the telecom provider. When a call came in, the computer would answer and give a warning before recording began. The warning stated, "Thank you for calling Central U.S. Inventory Logistics and Security Company. All phone calls are recorded for later use. If you do not want your call recorded, please hang up now. If you wish to speak to someone, please press 0 to be connected to an operator." It seemed Don either didn't consider the warning or was too furious to heed it. Because all his threats and boasting were captured after the warning he insisted on including in the system. Dave saw this as poetic justice. Unfortunately, all the individuals involved in Becky's circle stopped associating with her once the legal cases were initiated. Fortunately, Thad's acquaintance managed to capture video and audio recordings on the first Saturday, as none of the private investigators recorded any incriminating evidence. While some suspicious phone calls were obtained, they were mostly ambiguous and of little use. One of Sally's initial actions was to report Don to the State Bar Association. His law license was promptly suspended, and he was permanently disbarred due to his unethical conduct and threats, even before the divorce and legal proceedings concluded. Dave's divorce was finalized with Becky receiving a small portion, around 25%, of the marital assets. Dave retained ownership of his company. Furthermore, Dave was granted custody of the children, primarily due to a subtle detail initially overlooked during the photo session. When Thad's acquaintance captured images of Becky and the others, they inadvertently photographed another individual. This picture not only captured the scene of the event, but also showed a child peeking into the house from the backyard through the patio door. When the judge saw this evidence, full custody of the children was awarded to Dave. Dave's legal actions against Don proved highly successful. He was awarded $1.3 million in damages for breaching attorney-client privilege and for Don's misconduct in representing Becky while still acting as Dave's attorney. Don faced censure for his inappropriate relationship with Becky and various ethical violations, leading to fines payable to the state. As Dave pursued legal recourse against Don's financial situation deteriorated significantly, nearing bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Shelley, Don's wife, depleted most of their remaining marital assets during their divorce. Similarly, Pam, Kenny's wife, received a significant portion of his assets after their divorce. Surprisingly, Roger and Trixie remained married, as it was revealed that Trixie had willingly engaged in the group's activities. However, Roger grew discontented with his friend's continued exploitation of Trixie. When Don and Kenny moved in with Roger after being ousted from their homes, tensions escalated. Kenny's frustration boiled over one evening, leading to a violent altercation where he assaulted Don and Roger. Kenny was hospitalized due to injuries sustained in the fight, and Don and Kenny were subsequently convicted and sentenced to a year in jail. Consequently, Roger and Trixie ended their marriage. Reflecting on these events nearly a year later, Dave and Gertrude discussed a news article detailing the conflict involving Don, Kenny, and Roger over Trixie. Gertrude then inquired whether Dave maintained any contact with Rebecca, noting her supervised visits with their children. Dave glanced at her and replied firmly, "No. We only communicate when necessary, usually about the kids. I have no interest in speaking with her, and if I could avoid it entirely, I would. I was just curious. You two seemed perfect for years and then, well, I've always wondered if you knew why she did what she did. I just can't comprehend why a woman who loves her husband would act that way." Dave gazed at Gertrude, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He clenched his jaw and bit his lip before reaching into his desk drawer, retrieving a folder. He handed it to Gertrude. "I don't know why I held on to this letter. I'm not even sure why I agreed to read it. Remember when Becky's mother visited the office in tears about 7 months ago? She gave me this letter and insisted I read it before I left, so I did." Gertrude opened the folder and read the following. "Dear David, you may question why I still call you dearest, but despite everything, you're the man I love. I've made mistakes that hurt you, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. My actions weren't intentional, but I need to come clean about them. Our past relationships with our high school friends were complicated, but they didn't affect us until I made a mistake on our 9th anniversary. You were busy with work, and I ended up drinking too much at a Valentine's Day party. Feeling lonely, things took a turn when Don and Kenny drove me home. Reminiscing about past encounters led to a moment of weakness where I gave in to temptation with them. That night, I experienced feelings and pleasures that were intense and new. This led to more encounters with them, sometimes individually or together, whenever you were away. These moments were filled with excitement and fear of getting caught, which somehow added to the thrill. Don later suggested an arrangement to avoid the risk of getting caught, believing you might accept it to keep our family intact. I convinced myself you might agree, hoping to avoid losing you and our children, but I realize now how much pain and betrayal my actions have caused you. I'm truly sorry for the hurt I've caused. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Yours always." Becky Gertrude glanced up after reading the letter, her eyes teary, but she held back her anger. "Dave, I truly believe she still loves you more than anyone else. I know she's hurting, but Dave, she was nearly as much a victim as you were. I think your friend Don was a predator. You know, over the years, we've both heard some terrible rumors about him. I wouldn't be surprised if he intentionally got her drunk that first night. No man of high moral character, no true friend, would take advantage of her like she said he did. Yeah, I know, Gertie, but, well, I'm not entirely sure she gave me the whole truth there. She always seemed to pay more attention to Don than I would have liked. I brushed it off, but there were several times we argued after a party because I thought she was too friendly, letting him take too many liberties. But I never caught them in anything substantial to confront them about." Dave sighed. "I have to admit, after Don's phone call, when I finally caught them, thanks to you and Thad, I had enough doubts to get DNA tests done on the children. You can't imagine how relieved I was when the test confirmed I was their father." He paused, then added, "Well, anyway, I believe she thinks she loves me, but I don't think it's genuine love. It's more like infatuation, maybe a deep affection. I was easy to live with, a good provider and father. I now realize I was probably her last choice, and we married because, well, I'm not sure why she married me. I loved her deeply, but I don't think she felt that same depth of love for me. I believe that's why she cheated and continued to do so. She was selfish and only cared about her own pleasure, needs, and desires."
Story 2.
Confronting my wife's affair unveiled heartbreaking truths about our marriage and my son's father. I've been in a relationship with my wife for 15 years, and we've been married for nearly 12. Together we have 2 sons, one biological and one who I consider mine in every way. I met my wife at a mutual friend's barbecue. She had come with a friend of mine's wife. They had worked together at the time. We hit it off that day, and I thought we had been inseparable ever since that day. Lately, something changed. There's been a growing distance between us, an invisible wall that seems to be getting thicker by the day. I couldn't quite put my finger on when it started or why, but I felt it in the way she looked at me and the way she hesitated before speaking. It felt like we weren't on the same page at all. She'd go upstairs to read her book, and I'd be downstairs by myself. She'd go out to meet her friends more often, leaving me to take care of the boys. I couldn't remember the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about the kids or some mundane household chore. It was like we were going through the motions of being a married couple without actually being connected anymore. A few weeks ago, I dropped my wife off at her appointment while I went and did some quick running around. When I came back, I realized she left her phone in the car. I knew she'd be at least another 20 minutes. After a bit, a notification popped up. It was my stepson. Even though I'm completely unaware of how to use Snapchat, I thought it would be funny to send him a message from me using a filter instead of his mom. I sent off a goofy picture back to him. After sending, I somehow stumbled into my wife's chat section. At first glance, it was nothing. I went to put the phone down, but then I noticed a name I've always hated. I'll call him Lewis. At first, I hesitated. I never wanted to be that kind of person who invades someone's privacy by looking through their phone. I never thought I'd be that guy when it came to my wife. But then again, I never thought I'd be where I am right now. Curiosity got the best of me, and honestly, what I saw shocked me to my core. She had saved explicit photos of each other. There were nude photos of him and nude photos of her. There were videos. There were saved conversations about indecent actions between them. Without going into specifics, let's just say it involved oral sex. Despite the obvious betrayal, I couldn't stop myself from reading on. The scattered dates and sparse details from the past made it difficult to piece together the full story, but my curiosity drove me to keep going. With Snapchat, certain parts would automatically vanish, so this added another layer of complexity to the situation. What exactly happened? I needed to know. It was eating me up inside. From what I gathered, things started happening a few times over the past few months, including on my birthday as I slept. Upstairs. She had planned a surprise party for me because it was a certain important milestone. I ended up getting too drunk and going upstairs to fall asleep while the rest of the guests were downstairs. I guess she had invited him over. She knew I wouldn't wake up, that I was dead drunk. When the last guest dipped out, he dipped in. The way she spoke about me was most devastating. It was rarely positive and often only partially true, with some statements even being outright false or misleading. I don't know why it was saved, but she told him that I was a lousy lover who seemed disinterested in her anymore, which is so far from the truth. I like to think that I still had my vigor and stamina. We were intimate about 2 to 3 nights a week on average, even with her being strange and acting weird toward me over the last little while. But now, it all made sense. I suppose when I look back, now it's been me pleasuring her for the most part. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love making my wife feel good, but sometimes it's nice to get something in return. And now that I think about it, that hasn't happened for quite some time. Then I went on to read that she's disgusted by me and hates me touching her. Well, in that moment, the salon door opens, and she peeks out and smiles and waves me in. Was I a fool to pay for that for her? I was shocked. Dumbfounded. I didn't smile back, but I remember making sure I closed the chat she had with Lewis, making sure it didn't look like I was snooping around. I put the phone back where I found it, and then I made my way inside the salon. The kicker then was the lash lady was telling me that my wife was saying how amazing a husband I was and how she wishes she had a husband like me, who treated her so well. I had to smile and laugh. What on earth could she have been telling this lady when I was reading something completely earth-shattering moments earlier? As soon as we reached our car, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I spilled all the details to her, making sure she understood not to touch her phone until we had a chance to discuss everything. We cried and yelled on the drive home. Once we arrived, I immediately delved into the issue at hand. She was hesitant but eventually gave me her unlocked phone. It was a tough conversation from there on out. We argued over and over, with her denying and then admitting until finally she relented. She confessed that she had been feeling neglected and undesired, but that it wasn't an excuse to cheat. It was a confession that left me feeling heartbroken and betrayed, but also confused. I couldn't understand how everything had spiraled so out of control. Then I started asking myself, had I been so focused on my own desires that I had neglected her needs? Had I unintentionally pushed her toward Lewis's arms? I had questioned her about Lewis, trying to understand the extent of their relationship. My wife had responded by saying that they had been texting and sending nudes for months, but that they had never slept together. She maintained that it had always been just a sexting relationship and nothing more. I told her that it was hard to believe based on the messages back and forth to Lewis. Then she admitted to the infidelity with Lewis in our own home on my birthday. She said they had sex in the spare bedroom in the basement, And then there was a time she said she went for a hike with a girlfriend and had actually met up with him instead of her girlfriend. And they had sex off the trail in the middle of the bush. My heart fell to my feet as she confessed. I tried to remain composed, but my anger and pain boiled over. I had always been there for her, providing for her family and sacrificing my own personal time to be with her and our boys. How could she do this to me? How could she throw away everything we had built together? It gets better. I had to know everything, so I kept probing and asking all the questions that came to mind. As we got deeper into the conversation, more and more was uncovered. Now, this brings me to Lewis. Before we met, she had been seeing Lewis. I never liked the guy. She'd bring him up sometimes, and sometimes even mutual friends would bring him up, and I just hated it. There were little comments she'd bring up about him every now and again, and looking back, I should have known, but hindsight is always 20/20ths. What I didn't know was that she was seeing him behind my stepson's biological dad's back. Apparently, she didn't know who was my stepson's real father at the time she got pregnant, which is why the biological dad took off and left her. She kept seeing Lewis for a little while after, but he took off right before my stepson was born and left her high and dry with my precious boy. Eventually, she said she got a paternity test because she was trying to get financial assistance from my stepson's biological dad, and it was confirmed that he was in fact the father and not Lewis. As soon as she spoke those words, my thoughts ran wild, and I confronted her about any and every situation where she could have potentially cheated. Most of the examples were minor, except for one that stood out. Many years ago, before we were even married, she didn't come home until almost 2 a.m. after work one night. I asked her where she had been, but all she said was that she was out. Despite my concerns, I brushed it off in my naive state of being in a new relationship. However, it always stayed in the back of my mind, and it came up again on that particular night. As I asked her, trying to control my emotions that were a mix of anger and hurt, she immediately became tense. Now the waterworks started. Tears streamed down her face. She admitted to going for drinks with a male coworker who had been flirting with her. She had told him that she was single at the time, and they went for drinks and ended up making out in his car in the parking lot of the bar. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The lies, the betrayal, the years of secrets, the pain of the past was now coming back to haunt us. It felt like a lifetime of love and trust had been shattered in just a few hours of uncovering the truth. I didn't know who I was speaking to anymore, and so now, I'm here, writing this. My wife went away for the weekend so we could have some space. Apparently, she's at a girlfriend's house, but I can't even be sure about that. I told her that if I find out that she went to Lewis's place, the marriage is over, that this is over. She said she wouldn't, but who knows? Who knows what's true anymore? I'm taking the boys to their volleyball games this weekend, so I'll be able to keep myself busy. But I'm at a loss here. It seems that every direction I look is the wrong one. I don't want to lose my wife. I don't want to lose my boys. I love my family more than anything. However, I refuse to just sit back and be taken advantage of, to be made to feel small and deceived, only to shrug it off and act like it didn't affect me. I feel completely alone and unsure of what to do, so I took a leap of faith and came here, despite my lack of knowledge on the subject. I can't stop thinking about what she was telling Lewis. I feel totally emasculated. Do I follow through with divorce, seeing as how this seems to be a troubling trend? I wasn't lying when I said I found out she ran right to Lewis. This was it. I just have to figure out how to keep my boys. Being a father is the best thing that ever happened to me. Edit 1, I took pictures of the conversations they had and that we've had. I'm compiling the evidence just in case, and to keep her honest. Edit 2, I think I need to take a break and process everything until tomorrow. This has all been a bit too much for me to handle at the moment, but I want to thank everyone for their comments and advice, even the ones who believe my fate is to be a cuckold. I knew that people would have different and passionate opinions, and that's what I wanted, to hear others' perspectives. It's just difficult to accept that my marriage may be over so suddenly after investing half of my life into building it. If anything changes, I'll make sure to post an update. Well, that's certainly one way to find out your wife's been keeping secrets like a squirrel hoarding nuts for winter, huh? And Lewis, the mysterious figure lurking in the shadows of your marriage, making surprise appearances like a recurring villain in a bad movie sequel. Who needs Netflix when you've got this level of suspense right at home? At least you've got your priorities straight, documenting every scandalous detail, even though it's hard to read. Update 1, Monday morning came, and my wife comes back home. She gets ready, and I try to be cool and casual, ask where she stayed over the weekend before she goes to work. I just happened to be working from home that day. She told me it was a female coworker, Natalia, because she was too embarrassed to tell our mutual friends that we got into an argument because she didn't want to tell them what it was about. She said she wants to fix this and doesn't want everyone knowing. She said we can fix this. I had a hunch that she wouldn't tell me the truth. There were a few ladies she's close to at work. One of them has become a close friend of mine as well, and I didn't think she'd go there to air out her dirty laundry. The other, she's mentioned a few times. I know she's a real person because we've gone out on double dates a few times with whoever she's dating at the time. She can't keep a boyfriend, she's constantly dating someone new. And whenever my wife says she's going out for drinks with the girls, she's there, so I know she's a good time and sort of a bad influence. So if she's going anywhere to complain about a marriage and cry it out, it would have been her. So I'm not proud of it, but I go on Facebook and find Natalia's profile and message her on there. I kind of lie and say that I wanted to plan a fun date night with my wife next weekend, and I was hoping that Natalia could come along and invite whoever. I also go in and sort of say, I hope you and my wife had a good time over the weekend. She comes back and says she'd love to hang out, but then quickly says that she's not sure what I'm talking about. She said she's been out of town for a funeral, but will be back in time for the date night next weekend. And so then I knew my wife had been lying again. I sat there in disbelief, staring at my phone as I read Natalia's response. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the information. She had lied to me again. It was like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't believe the extent of her deceit. I felt a surge of anger and hurt coursing through my veins. How could she do this to me, to her family? I thought we were partners, equals in this marriage. But now I started to wonder if I had ever truly known her. Well, it's over. She said she didn't want everyone knowing. I picked up the phone and called my brother, who just went through something similar. I told him what happened, and I'm not afraid to say that I shed some tears. I couldn't let my wife continue to lie and manipulate me. It was time to take control of my life and protect my family. He gave me the information for his lawyer, and I immediately emailed him. His assistant got back right away, and I got things started. I said I wanted joint custody of my kids and explained the situation. I told my brother not to tell anybody quite yet, but that I wanted to get things settled and really hit her where it hurts before anybody found out. Smooth move, OP. Kudos on the swift decision to call in the cavalry because nothing says I'm done with your lies like calling up the lawyer and dropping the D word. Your wife's lies are like a slap in the face, leaving you reeling with disbelief and betrayal. From fabricating tales about innocent outings to concocting elaborate excuses, she's mastered the art of deception with alarming ease. Update 2. A few weeks later, I received a call from the lawyer's office. He informed me that the divorce was underway and that I needed to gather all pertinent information and documents. I felt a sense of relief knowing that I was taking the necessary steps to protect myself and my family. During this time, I also reached out to a therapist to help me navigate the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. He also said that I had a good chance of keeping my kids with me if they chose to stay with me. Well, that also scared me because I felt like we were all so close. I didn't want my kids to have to choose between their mom or dad. This was all supposed to be pretty secret. I wanted to make sure I had everything covered before giving her the papers because I didn't know how she'd react. So, I was essentially waiting for the right moment. Some of you might think that I was just dragging it on, but I wasn't. There was a method to the madness. Yes, during all of this, I was still acting like I was wanting to fix things with my wife. I couldn't give her any idea that I was wanting to end things. So I played along. I tried to play house to the best of my ability, but then there was sort of this sticky thing that happened. In trying to keep things secret, things, in fact, did not stay a secret. My brother, of course, told his wife, and his wife then kind of spilled the beans to everyone. I wasn't really mad about it, but then it ended up getting back to my sons because their cousins told them what their mom had done. My sons sat me down one day while their mom was out and said that they knew what was going on with me and mom. They said they had my back and that no matter what, they don't want to live with her. I told them I'd do whatever I could to make that happen. Later that day, I decided to give my soon-to-be ex the divorce papers. As I handed her the papers, she was in shock. She couldn't believe that I had taken such a drastic measure and she begged me to reconsider. But I was firm in my decision. I made it clear that I wanted to do what was best for our kids, and that I was willing to fight for their best interest. In the coming weeks, the legal process began. We met with our respective lawyers and the negotiation started. Every day, I felt the weight of the divorce hanging over me like a dark cloud, but I knew that I had to be strong for my kids. During this time, the boys stayed with me, and my soon-to-be ex moved out. You guessed it, she went to stay with Lewis. Yikes. Your carefully constructed plan starts to unravel faster than a cheap sweater in the wash. Thanks a lot, loose-lipped relatives, for turning a covert operation into a family gossip fest. And let's not forget the emotional bombshell dropped by your sons when they pledged their allegiance to Team Dad. Their declaration that they don't want to live with their mom, that they have your back, is nothing short of touching. It's a testament to the bond you've built with them. Update 3. The boys are with me full-time, and that's now legal in court. My ex gets them every second weekend, but that was only if she moved out of Lewis's place and got her own apartment, which she did. She stayed with Lewis a little bit longer. She also quit her job that she's been at for over 10 years because he claimed he had an opportunity for her to work from home doing something with his business or something like that. But he actually ended up getting arrested for tax evasion. I don't really know the details. Anyway, I'll try to keep things as simple as possible. She's out of a job, and she's currently looking for employment. She's asked me for money a few times to pay the rent, but I flat out told her that I can't do it. I think she's now looking to move back into her family home with her mom and dad. She has nowhere else to go. Everyone's pretty unimpressed with her right now, and the boys don't really want to have anything to do with her. The divorce proceedings were difficult, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a roller coaster of emotions, and it felt like a heavy weight was on my chest every day. My ex tried to pull me down, and there were times when I thought I would never see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I kept going, not just for myself, but for my boys. They needed a stable environment, and I knew that I had to be the one to provide that for them. Well, it sounds like your ex has really hit rock bottom, huh? Good. I mean, quitting her job for a sketchy work-from-home opportunity with her tax-evading beau? Really? At least you've got the boys on your side, right? They're like the ultimate judge and jury, handing down the verdict of, we don't want anything to do with mom faster than you can say child support payments. As for you, you're just trying to keep your head above water in this sea of drama. It's like being the captain of the Titanic, except instead of an iceberg, you're navigating through your ex's train wreck of life choices. Cheers to standing firm in the face of adversity and forging a brighter future for yourself and your boys. What do you make of this? Did you ever have to maintain a sense of stability and normalcy for your children amidst the chaos of divorce? Share your stories with us in the comments below, and thank you for joining us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.
Story 3.
I can't believe this is happening to me. My wife and I, who is 48, have been married for 14 years, but now it feels like she's a stranger. A few years ago, she got a promotion and started making more money. Since then, she's been distant. When the quarantine hit, she underwent a sudden change. It was like a switch flipped, and she told me she couldn't handle being stuck at home. This lockdown made us confront the issues in our marriage, which we always had but ignored before. Initially, we were very compatible, but now it seems like we have nothing in common. I know we're not the only couple struggling with work, kids, and life, but it doesn't make it any easier. Before the pandemic, we argued about everything, and she always turned it into a big deal. She suggested marriage counseling, and I reluctantly agreed, hoping to go back to how things used to be. However, finding a counselor during the lockdown was impossible, so I proposed we try talking things out ourselves. I won't lie, it's been tough. Our problems caused me to shut down, and we started sleeping in separate rooms. Though we still have moments of closeness, it's not enough. She's a great mom to our kids, but what about us? I'm determined to fix this, no matter what it takes. I want to feel that spark we had when we first got married. Update. In June, I reached a point where I couldn't handle it anymore. I didn't understand why everything was changing so much, and it hurt to see my family falling apart. Even though my kids are young, they can tell something's wrong, and it's affecting their mood. I trusted my gut feeling that something worse than our already messed up marriage was happening. That's when I decided to play detective. I noticed my wife always has her phone, keeping it close and hidden. She's always on it, ignoring me and the TV, waiting for the next text. It's like she's hypnotized, focusing only on the phone. Sometimes she leaves the house, saying she's bored, but I suspect she's meeting someone. Being stuck at home made me realize how clueless I've been. I know something's off, but I need to be sure. That's why I ordered a voice-activated recorder on Amazon and put it in her car while she was asleep. After anxiously waiting for 2 days, I finally got the recorder from her car. As I listened, my heart sank. My wife was the only one talking, but she was clearly talking to a guy. They discussed work, but also how much they missed each other and how bored she was with our marriage. I could hear the excitement in her voice about meeting him. My worst fears were true. My wife was having an affair. Listening further, I heard them plan to meet at a hotel parking lot near our house. When she got there, I heard the car door close as she got out. My mind was racing. Should I confront her now? Should I wait and gather more evidence? It was the toughest thing I've ever done, sitting there pretending everything was fine while my heart was shattered. The idea of my wife cheating was unbearable. I had to act normal, even though my mind was racing and my stomach was in knots. Some might wonder why I don't confront her right away, but I know her too well. She won't confess easily, and she's clever. She would deny everything, and it would turn into a huge fight. Without strong evidence, getting the closure I needed would be tough. That's why I took matters into my own hands. Besides the recorder, I also put a GPS tracker in her car. It's extreme, but I needed the truth. And if my suspicions were correct, I needed to be prepared for what was coming. Update. In mid-June, COVID restrictions were easing up where I live, and my wife and I had started going back to work. One evening after we both got home from work, we had dinner and watched TV. While she was on her phone texting, she suddenly said she was going for a late-night ride to clear her head. At first, when she mentioned that, I felt a mix of anger and relief. I had been waiting for this moment for the past 2 weeks because catching her red-handed had been on my mind constantly. I couldn't even concentrate at work because of it. I couldn't help but wonder how things went so wrong in our marriage. Was it because she was making more money now? I knew I shouldn't blame myself for her cheating, but I couldn't help feeling that way. As soon as I heard her car leave the driveway, I turned off the TV and put the kids to bed. Then I grabbed my phone and opened the tracking app. I saw her car was in a parking lot close to our house. I assumed they booked a hotel room there, so I planned on waiting in the hotel lobby to catch them when they came out. I couldn't believe how careless my wife was for choosing such a location for cheating. Or was I so blind that she thought I wouldn't find out? Who goes for a ride in the middle of the night to clear their head anyway? She must think I'm a fool. Or maybe she took advantage of our rough patch and wanted some space. After about 20 minutes since she left, I got into my car and drove to the hotel. When I arrived, I saw only 5 cars in the parking lot, which was usually not busy, but it looked unusually quiet. I noticed that the lobby lights were off, so I realized the hotel was still shut down. I parked my car at a distance and noticed my wife's car in a secluded area of the lot, with an SUV parked next to it. My heart started beating fast when I thought they might be in either her car or his. I wasn't sure if they noticed me because of how they parked, giving them a view of any car entering the parking lot from the highway. The lot was dark and quiet, and they were in a secluded area. I turned off my car and stared in their direction to see if I could make out whether they were still in the car. Since the hotel was closed, they must have been in either his or her car. The longer I stared, the more I realized they weren't in the car because both sides were empty. By now, almost 40 minutes had passed since she left the house, and I knew she would be heading back home soon because she knew I would be worried. The thought of her leaving the house and kids for some questionable encounter in a motel parking lot with a stranger made me lose it. This was not the same woman I had been married to for 15 years. I couldn't just drive to where they parked because it was about 30 yards away, so I decided to get out of my car and walk toward their car in a way they wouldn't see me coming. The closer I got, the more I noticed a rhythmic movement in the SUV. All the emotions I had been holding back suddenly overwhelmed me, and I ran toward the car. When I got there, I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I couldn't believe what I saw. My wife, who I've been married to for 15 years, was getting close with a stranger in a rundown motel parking lot like some kind of cheap affair. The guy drove away as fast as he could, leaving me feeling like I failed in my mission to catch them in the act. I really wanted to catch them red-handed, with their clothes off, but at least she can't deny what she did. Update. I stayed awake all night, anticipating her return. It wasn't until 5 a.m. that she finally entered. The moment I saw her, I sensed something amiss. She appeared completely drained, as if she had faced a battle. Her body language conveyed guilt and shame, and she couldn't meet my gaze. The first words she uttered were an attempt to explain, insisting it wasn't as it seemed. However, I was already aware she had been meeting this guy repeatedly. She confessed to knowing him for about 6 months, but refused to disclose his identity or that they worked together. She explained they both faced marriage problems and loneliness, seeking support from each other. Their closeness occurred only once, and that was when I caught them. She became defensive, citing our rocky marriage and her stress. While she didn't want to separate, she felt the need for space to figure things out. She was upset that I had eavesdropped and followed her, even stating she wouldn't stop seeing this person as he provided support, especially considering the challenges between us. I was devastated. It felt like my world had crumbled. How could she do this after all our years together? The pain was almost unbearable, and I didn't know how to get through it. I acknowledged it was over between us and had resolved to tell her I wanted a divorce. I didn't expect her surprise, and she certainly didn't express guilt. She had already justified her actions, claiming our loveless marriage pushed her to seek happiness elsewhere. I knew she would probably move on with her affair partner, a reality I had accepted. It hurt, but I recognized it was for the best. I couldn't continue in a loveless marriage, and I couldn't force her to stay if her heart wasn't in it. Despite the urge to express anger for her actions, I still wanted to hear her out, knowing she might only speak lies. A small part of me hoped she'd say something that could make me consider staying and working things out. I still love her in a way. Just thinking about it hurts more than eating jalapenos for breakfast. I set the terms with my wife, stating that for us to attempt marriage counseling, she must fully disclose everything about the affair. I want to know when it started, and she must sever all ties with her affair partner. Quitting her job is non-negotiable. I don't want her near him. However, she's making it difficult, claiming she already disclosed everything, which I doubt. She insists she's been ignoring his calls, but I'm skeptical. They work together, and she holds a high position, making quitting challenging. She suggests a department transfer, but I'm unsure if that's sufficient. I want her to make him transfer or leave the company altogether. If she can't do that, then we might as well end things now. I'm so angry and hurt by all of this, and I just want her to prove that she's willing to do whatever it takes to save our marriage. Update. It was an excellent day for me because I finally discovered the identity of the other guy. I left work early and went to my wife's workplace to see the car he drives. I found it and waited for him to finish work and leave. I followed him for 25 miles until he arrived home, getting his full contact information and even finding his picture online. Turns out, he's married with 3 kids, and I also have his wife's information. After a few days of thinking, I eventually called his wife and disclosed everything. She was understandably angry and wanted to confront her husband right away, but I advised her to think it through first. She mentioned they had a summer vacation planned with extended families, so the timing wasn't ideal for a confrontation. It's been a couple of days, and I'm unsure if she's confronted him yet. She said they have a summer vacation planned next week with extended families and kids, so they weren't sure about the timing for confronting. Following my conversation with my unfaithful wife, she agreed to provide me with a written rundown of when the affair began, switch teams at work to distance herself from her fling buddy within 3 weeks, and cut off all contact with him. Now, I know some of you might say, call HR and expose those cheaters. But honestly, what's in it for me? I make decent money, but she still brings home the bacon, and if we split now, I won't have to pay any cash for child support or alimony. The only thing that worries me is the thought of a custody battle. Don't get me wrong, I'm still considering ending this marriage. I only agreed to the meeting to make it seem like I still care and buy some time to talk to a lawyer and figure out my options. So, I read the timeline my wife gave me, and it was like a stab to the heart. It was clear that she's head over heels for her fling partner, even though she keeps apologizing and acting like she wants to work on our marriage. But let's face it, the ship has sailed. If I agree to go to couples counseling, I'd basically be telling her that I'm okay with her cheating. I bet her affair partner wants to stay with his own wife, and she's just using me as a backup plan. This morning, I contacted 3 lawyers downtown to find the right one for me. I ended up with a badass female lawyer who heard my story and reviewed the written timeline. She said it was smart of me to gather that evidence. And even if it's not entirely true, It could still help my case if things get messy in court. She also informed me that in my state, I have 3 months from the time I found out about the cheating to file for divorce. Otherwise, it'll look like I'm okay with it. I'm hoping this will come in handy during the custody battle, just in case. Update. Last night, I informed my unfaithful wife that I'm going ahead with the divorce. I initially planned to serve her the papers at her workplace, but I decided to have a mature conversation first. I wasn't ready for her reaction. She accused me of tricking her and giving false hope about fixing things. I fired back, reminding her that she made her choices when she acted inappropriately in a parking lot. It escalated into a heated argument with both of us yelling. At one point, she started crying and pleaded for forgiveness, claiming she loves me. I despise her for putting me in this situation and ruining my family, but I know I had to do what's best for me. After meeting with my lawyers, I went to Kinko's to print the legal documents. When my wayward wife returned home, I had the papers ready for her to sign. She acted surprised and tried to convince me we could reconcile, but I saw through it. I reminded her that she lied about her affair for 2 years, destroying any trust I had. I told her to sign the papers for the sake of our kids, but she refused, insisting on consulting her lawyer first. She even had the audacity to claim she didn't want to be with her affair partner and wanted me back. Yeah, right. She had her chance and blew it. Despite her tears and pleas, I'm done with her. As I walked away, she switched from crying to an angry tone, yelling, "Keep walking away like a coward. I will not sign anything till I speak to my lawyer." One day, she eventually signed the papers, probably after consulting her own lawyer. Despite the divorce proceedings, she continues with her daily chores, like cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the kids. She might be trying to show she can handle everything alone, but we all know she can't resist my charming personality and the benefits of being married to me. Update. Got some interesting news today. The spouse of the person my spouse cheated with gave me a call out of the blue. Not sure how she got my number. Maybe I shared it when I confronted her and her cheating husband in her office. She was a bit secretive on the phone, suggesting we meet for lunch at a cafe tomorrow. Surprisingly, I'm also scheduled to meet her this afternoon. Feeling nervous and on edge, who knows what she's got up her sleeve. Last time we spoke, she was upset about her husband's cheating ways. Seems like a hard-working business owner, maybe in her late 30s. Initially, I thought she and her husband were in their 40s, but who am I to judge? Maybe they've had a tough life. I took a snapshot of my wife's timeline on my phone and sent the hard copy to my lawyer. Also gave my boss a heads up that I might not be back from lunch. Who knows? Maybe I won't return at all. We decided to meet at a nearby coffee shop, not far from where I work. As I walked in, the other betrayed spouse was already standing up, ready to face me. Tried to play it cool with a handshake, but she went in for the hug. Bit awkward, but I guess we had an instant connection, both betrayed and left to pick up the pieces. She started by thanking me for telling her about her husband's infidelity. Then, she dropped news that would rock my world. Apparently, she had some inside info on my wife that would really upset me. Thought about writing me a letter, but said it wouldn't do it justice. Plus, she wanted to send a message to my wife, but she was afraid things would turn ugly if they met in person. So, she asked me to relay the message to my wife to stay away from her husband. Turns out, this betrayed spouse was no dummy. Instead of losing it like I did, she took my advice and hired a private investigator to gather evidence. Even installed spy software on her husband's phone and retrieved emails and texts between him and my wife for the past 4 years. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, my wife guards her phone like it's the Hope Diamond, not letting me near it. So it turns out my cheating wife and her side piece have been sneaking around on some secret app, avoiding their work email for anything romantic. But the private investigator found their texts, and it's clear they've been up to no good for 3 years, turning physical 2 years ago. Even though no hotel receipts, the investigator saw they met up at least twice a week in hotels and bars. And get this, the affair started a few months before she got a promotion. Messages show my wife was an active participant, while the other guy just went with the flow. I mean, even a dude like me can see that. Gotta say, I'm more crushed now than when I caught her in the parking lot. Feel like a total loser, humiliated and embarrassed. I've loved this woman, and this is how she repays me, by calling me old, unadventurous, and lacking ambition. They even made fun of me behind my back. The meeting with the other betrayed spouse took forever, like 3 or 4 hours. She gave me a copy of all the evidence, since she had a backup. Planned to show her the timeline my wife wrote, but it was so obvious it would have been embarrassing to bring up. After the meeting, she hugged me again, and we said our goodbyes. Went to a nearby bar to drown my sorrows. Looks like my ex never loved me, even though I thought we had a good relationship. She was hiding a whole other side of herself, showing it off to another guy without me knowing. Meanwhile, I was just the guy she settled for, the one taking care of the kids and keeping the house in order while she was busy climbing the career ladder with other guys from work. Another woman whose husband was cheated on gave me names of other married managers my wife had hookups with. Apparently, she decided to focus on one guy, but who knows how long the other flings lasted. Update. I feel really betrayed and hurt right now, and I want her to feel the pain too. This woman is just plain evil, and she needs to pay for her lies. I won't just confront her like a wimp. I need to show her I'm not weak. So I'll try something she'd never expect, something that'll shock her. I want to hurt her so bad that it exposes who she really is. The thing is, my wife is excellent at putting up a fake front for the community. She always acts like the sweetest, most wholesome lady to our neighbors, bringing over casseroles and such. And at church, she's the go-to usher and model Christian wife, always with a smile on her face. But deep down, she's very insecure about her image and what people think of her. She's a type A personality, a natural leader. And to her parents, she's daddy's little angel with a halo over her head. They think she can do no wrong, and they always blamed me for our marriage problems. They have no idea I caught her hooking up with some guy in a parking lot. But now, it's time to take off the kid gloves. It's time to shatter their little bubble. I'm going to send all those juicy text messages and pics to her parents and let them see their precious daughter for who she really is. So I went to Kinko's to make copies of the evidence that the other betrayed wife gave me. Then I met up with my lawyer to discuss my options. I showed her the evidence and asked if I could sue my wife's employer and those 2 other married managers. My goal is not to win, but to expose those cheaters and create a scandal that would make great headlines. My lawyer said we could sue for alienation of affection, but that requires my wife's cooperation, and we both know she won't do that. However, my lawyer did draft some legal documents that I can use to give my wife an ultimatum to get a better deal in the divorce settlement and move out of my house ASAP. This will be her wake-up call. I will threaten her that I was going to sue her company and the managers she had closeness with, and I will also notify the local papers. I'll also let the local papers know about it, just to make it sound more dramatic. I mean, even if the lawsuit is stupid and gets thrown out of court, the damage will already be done once the public hears about it. And then she'll have no choice but to move out of our family home and leave it all to me. Oh, and yeah, I got a lawyer to draft a legal paper to sue her employer and those managers. Just in case. Yesterday, I had to pick up my kids from school and take them to my wife's parents' place. They're sweet old folks, in their 70s, retired and all that jazz. I decided to have a little chat with them and show them some evidence of their daughter's affair, including some naughty pics that really drove the point home. The poor dad was heartbroken and kept apologizing to me, while the mom couldn't believe her precious church-going daughter could do such a thing. It was kinda sad to see them realize what their daughter was really up to. I mean, I knew it would hurt them, but still. When I got back home, my wife was on the phone with her parents, sobbing her eyes out, but the moment she saw me, she hung up and started freaking out, asking all sorts of questions about the evidence I had on her. She was shaking and sweating like crazy, like her whole world was about to collapse. And you know what? It kind of felt good to see her like that. I totally caught my wife off guard when I dropped some major lawsuit intel on her. I mean, her reaction was priceless. She looked like she was about to hurl and even pulled on her hair like she was trying to rip it out. And just for kicks, I told her I had already called up the local paper to give them the scoop. Of course, this sent her into panic mode. She started begging me to drop the whole thing, offering up an amicable divorce and even alimony payments. But all I wanted was for her to pack her bags and get out of our house ASAP. I straight up told my ex that I wanted her to hit the road and take her name off the deed to our love shack. Oh, and I also wanted 50-50 custody of the kids and a chill divorce. She hesitated for a sec, but then caved and said, "Absolutely." While still groveling on the floor, my ex begged me to give her a week to vacate the premises. She claimed to have no other options, since all her friends are married and her parents are currently giving her the cold shoulder. I suggested she stay in an extended stay hotel until the condo I had already rented was ready for her to take over, and that's exactly what happened. 2 days later, she was out of my hair and in a new place. We ended up finalizing the divorce a few weeks later, and I got custody of the kids and the house. It was probably a little bit of a hit for her since she makes more money than me, but hey, that's life. Now that it's all said and done, I'm getting back in shape and staying away from the booze. And as far as dating goes, well, I'm not in any rush to jump back into the game.
Story 4.
I always believed in the sanctity of hard work and commitment. Growing up in a household where loyalty was everything, I carried those values into my adulthood. As the son of a steelworker and a teacher, I saw firsthand the sacrifices my parents made for our family. They taught me that relationships, much like the bridges my father built, required a strong foundation and constant maintenance. When I met Charlene, I thought I had found someone who shared those principles. We fell in love quickly, moved into a modest home, and built a life together. Over time, that life grew, first with our 2 daughters, then with the business I poured my soul into. It wasn't always easy, but I never doubted the strength of our bond. At least, not until the cracks began to show. I learned through experience that supporting her financially was less of a strain than enduring the alternative. Owning my own company meant alimony was a certainty if she wasn't working. While my daughters were the most important part of my life, the looming financial burden threatened to limit the time I could spend with them. To make matters worse, there was a possibility she could claim half of my business, leaving me to survive on less than a third of my earnings. I left the lawyer's office feeling defeated, as usual. Charlene was already ahead of me, and when I caught up, she said, "I've been doing this for 8 months, and it hasn't hurt us. He's a great lover, just different." She added, "I don't know who I'd choose, but think before you act. Go see a lawyer. If we break up, it'll be hell, and I'll make sure of it." I stared at her, trying to process who she was. This wasn't the woman I'd trusted for 14 years. At least, I wouldn't have to sneak around anymore. "You'll still get most of my time," she said. "But I won't ignore Jim. I'll figure out a schedule." I got up and left, and she followed me to the street, but went quiet when she saw Mrs. Roseman. I smiled and nodded, and she hissed, "Get over here now," as I walked away. After 2 days, I came back to a smug look on her face. The girls, now 13 and 11, were thrilled to see me, and I spent the evening with them. After they went to bed, Charlene brought me a beer, but I didn't want anything from her anymore. "I'm glad you came to your senses," she said. "We'll live like before, but I'll have dates sometimes. No one will know." I couldn't hold back anymore. "Here's what's happening. I'm staying until Marissa turns 18, then I'm gone. Darcy will be fine, and maybe she'll come live with me. Either way, I'm out." I paused, then continued. "I'm done with you. I won't sleep with you again. You've turned into someone else. I'm moving into a spare room, and I'm not talking about this again. I'll have my own life, and if I meet someone, so be it. But you need a job or Jim better pay your way. The girls will get everything they need, but no more joint accounts." Her face went pale, then furious. "You're an a-hole," she spat. "I still love you and want to be with you. This is crazy. Things won't change." "They already have," I said. "Now go to bed." She shot back. "If your mistress doesn't work out, you'll be popular at Patterson in Maine. You might want to think about that." Later, I caught her on the phone with her lover. I grabbed the phone and said, "I have your number. I'll get your address and we'll talk about what we have in common. Don't worry about me hurting you, but you won't want a relationship with her knowing she cheats." I hung up and pocketed the phone. Charlene didn't say a word when the girls walked in and asked what was wrong with the door. "Just moisture," I said. "I'll fix it tomorrow." When the kids left, I stopped Charlene from going to bed. "I'm keeping your phone until tomorrow, and I'll be checking your account." "Good night," she hissed. "Good luck," I replied, knowing she had no idea I'd set up a keystroke logger on the computer. Soon I had all her emails, search history, and purchases from the last year. She was too careless. Her lover worked for the county as a permit checker. They met when Charlene came to get a permit to build my workshop. Really my man cave. When the estrogen levels at home got too high, I'd retreat there, playing pool or watching sports. She had to return a few times for follow-ups, which turned into flirting, coffee, and lunches. Sometimes she led the way. I locked up all the evidence, sent the files to my office computer, and went to bed. I slept surprisingly well. In the morning, I made breakfast as the girls chatted about school and boys. They were obsessed with boy bands, and I barely paid attention. Thankfully, they were still too young for anything serious. Marissa, now 13, was starting to get noticed by boys, so we let her walk with friends, supervised by one of us. We hoped this would help them avoid doing anything stupid when they were old enough to date. Darcy, or Echo, as we called her, was too young for that, but we made sure she had plenty of supervised social time between sports, dance, band, and drama. I dropped the first bombshell at breakfast. Sorry, girls, but I have new responsibilities at work. Mom will be your main driver for now. Since she's not working, she'll have the time. Charlene tried to argue, but the girls quickly sided with me. They didn't want to ride with their friends, especially after some uncomfortable experiences. Charlene didn't give up easily, but I knew it would be a pattern. Her lover's visits happened mostly during the day, after the girls were off to school. If you think this is over, I said to Charlene, you're wrong, and it's not a mistake I'm making. I added, I've wired the house for sound and video. Get your lover in here, and it'll be online within the hour. She was still talking when I left. I watched the video footage of her freaking out, searching for the hidden cameras. It was entertaining. I also overheard several phone conversations, including one with her lover. He sounded uncomfortable when she vented. He's ruining everything. He canceled all my cards, and our bank balance is down to $280. The electric bill is due today. We may have to go to Plan B. Her lover wanted to wait. If we leave now, we'll be broke, and everyone will know why. Let's take it slow, live in nice houses, and keep this secret a little longer. Charlene wasn't happy with that. So much for love, she muttered. Later, she tried to make plans to meet him at his place, but he refused, worried about the house being wired. I believe him, he said. We can't risk it. When their conversation ended, she sat, looking confused. She'd hoped for the perfect life, but reality was quickly catching up. I checked on her later, and she was at the computer, realizing I'd locked her out. Fool, she yelled, coming up with every curse she could think of. I called her just to tease. Hi, honey, I said, dripping sarcasm. You're having a great day, I see. Your computer's locked up tighter than Fort Knox, and your phone's about to be disconnected. But don't worry, I ordered you a new one. It'll be here tomorrow. You fool, she yelled again, but I hung up before she could say more. I overheard the rest of the details through the surveillance system my tech-savvy friend had set up while Charlene was with her lover. That night, when I gave her a new best-in-class phone, she smiled. The next day, I heard her frustration as she tried to use it. The phone had a safety feature for kids, which worked out perfectly for me. The only numbers she could call were the school, my office, our doctors, her mother, my parents, and emergency. Any attempt to dial another number would disconnect the call for 30 seconds before rebooting. She discovered this when she tried calling her lover, and once it rebooted, I called her. Hey, I said, guess you figured out the phone only works with preset numbers. It's hard to reach your sweetheart without a phone or computer, isn't it? I'd apologize, but unlike you, I don't lie. Here's a suggestion. Get a job. You'll need one if you want to shop. I'll take care of the kids, but you're on your own for everything else. Maybe now you'll wear those clothes with the tags still on. I hung up before she could respond. When I got home, things were cold. She struggled to keep it together around the girls, but once they were asleep, we went to the basement. She screamed and threatened me, but I just smirked. Then she switched tactics and started crying. Please stop being mean. I didn't do it on purpose. He's just a fling. I'll go back to loving you. It didn't hurt you before, and it won't now. It's only a few hours a week. The rest of the time, I'm all yours. Come to bed with me tonight, and let me prove I still love you. I laughed. You know, I looked online for excuses for cheating. There's even a book called The Cheater's Handbook with advice on handling affairs. You've used a lot of the excuses in it. It just happened. It won't affect us. It's only an affair. And the best part, threatening to destroy his world if he doesn't agree. She looked conflicted, but before she could respond, I went on. Let's say I agree to your plan. What do I get? I still pay the bills and do all the work, but now I have to share you with someone else. As a businessman, that's not a good deal. You get to have fun with him and I just work and wait. That's not happening. Since you've declared an open marriage, I'll be looking too. There's a sales rep I've been talking to. She's into fitness and runs marathons. Next time she comes in, I'll ask her to lunch. I'll explain we have an open marriage and you've had a lover for almost a year now. She seems pretty open-minded. I could tell that jab about her weight stung. After 2 kids, she was a little softer than when we first met, but that was on her. If she got off the couch and went to the gym instead of shopping, maybe things would be different. She looked shocked. Why? Why do you need someone else when I'm right here? I still love you. The thought of you being with someone else hurts me. I responded coolly. I've been free for 16 years, but that wasn't enough for you, was it? Do you think I was thrilled when I found out you were cheating? There's a name for guys who let their wives have fun with others while they stay faithful, just like there's a name for women who do the same. The promiscuous bite express is officially derailed. Think about that. I'm going to bed. At least one of us has to work. She hissed at me as I left. I knew I needed a plan before she really tried to ruin my life. I reached out to an old friend, our neighbor's son, who was socially awkward but brilliant with computers. He had been developing games since he was 14 and had made a fortune by his 30s. Now he lived with his wife in a mansion worth millions. She was stunning, but not the sharpest tool in the shed. I had introduced them a few years ago at one of my parties. At the party, Harry had announced his engagement to June, the daughter of one of my biggest clients. She was drop-dead gorgeous, but a bit naive. Harry had been a shy, quiet guy, but after meeting her, he finally proposed. Their wedding was set for June 17th at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Broadville. He looked at her with a proud smile, and she took his hand as he made the announcement. Charlene didn't mention the details right away, but she told him the type of ring she wanted, and the next day he gave her a credit card. She took it from there. They'd been together 8 years, and their daughter, Star, was 7. My girls adored her like a little sister. It wasn't unusual for me to come home and see a Lexus SUV in the driveway with the driver chatting with Charlene. She'd always smile and smirk when she saw me. Shanna, a former military woman, was tough, attractive, and highly skilled. She had black belts in 3 martial arts and was a top pistol shooter. At one point, she worked for me, but I could tell she was bored. One day, June dropped by to discuss a social event. I was in a meeting, so Shanna kept her company. By the time I finished, I had lost an employee to June. Another win for them. Shanna ended up living in a small apartment at their mansion, separate from Harry and June's main house. But when a hijacker tried to snatch one of their children, Shanna shot him in the head after only a few minutes. The case was covered up, but the man had been armed and threatening. Shanna was let off, and from then on, she became Star's bodyguard. My girls sometimes vacationed with them, but Charlene always found an excuse for us to stay behind. I knew Harry was surprised by this turn of events, but June wasn't. She seemed distracted whenever I saw her, and at our last party, I caught her in the garden too close to another guest. She pulled away quickly when she saw me. I wasn't sure if they'd been kissing, but I didn't confront her about it. We split up at events like this to socialize, and I noticed her absence, assuming she was elsewhere. But when she came back, she stuck by me all night. Later, Harry and I discussed the situation. "What exactly do you want, Jack?" he asked. "I want my girls in my life, above all, and I want her to regret what she did. It's over between us. But she doesn't realize it yet. When she does, I want to make sure I'm financially secure," I replied. Harry asked about the house. We bought it at a steep discount, around 60% of its market value, due to its elderly owner's neglect. We'd invested a lot in restoring it, and now it was worth twice what we'd spent. Charlene would fight for it after the divorce. Charlene suggested I remodel the basement into an apartment with separate wiring and a driveway, creating a space where I could have my own life and still see the kids. She believed it would be an easy sell in court since the girls would be involved. Shanna suggested another option. "I can handle this. I'll make their lives miserable for you, no problem." I didn't want to go down that road, though. "Let's stick to plan C," I said. Shanna wasn't thrilled, but agreed. Before leaving, she warned, "She's got a thing for you now, Jack. Watch out when you're single." I was surprised. I always liked Shanna, but I didn't realize she had feelings for me. The house was in my name, which worked out since I was the primary earner. After consulting with contractors and a lawyer, I decided to remodel the basement. I also set up an allowance for Charlene, just enough for her to go out, but not unlimited spending. I took her Mercedes in for repairs and installed a GPS system with remote shutdown capabilities. I noticed Charlene's lunch breaks were getting longer. She'd go out with friends, then sneak off to her lover's house for a couple of hours. One day, I followed her GPS, and when she headed to his place, I turned off her car. She called in a panic, saying the car wouldn't start. When I asked where she was, she told me she was across town. She claimed she was stopping by a friend's to get her bag from their shopping trip. I let her sweat for a moment, then told her to try starting the car again. She did, and drove a few blocks before it stalled again. When she finally made it home, she realized what was happening. Later, I recorded a screaming match between her and Marissa, our daughter, where Charlene kicked her out of the room. The sight of our daughter hurt her, but it was too late. When she asked about the basement, I told her I was setting it up for the girls. She thought that meant I was okay with her affair. Charlene bought a new phone, which I planted a tracker on. It turned out she and her lover were planning to leave their spouses and move into my house, with me paying most of the bills. My actions had thrown off their plans. Charlene wanted to call it off, fearing I'd do something drastic. Her lover dismissed it, but she worried about the fallout, especially since he worked for the county. She said I should take a month to think things over while she worked on repairing things with her husband. I decided to use that month to finalize my plans. I set up a meeting with Fred, the county commission chairman, to discuss moving my business. I told him Hanover County had better incentives, which worried him. He didn't want to lose 89 jobs in his district, especially during an election year. I told him I was having trouble with zoning and permits and needed his help. Then I dropped the bomb. Your zoning manager is sleeping with my wife, and I know. Fred looked deflated, knowing the scandal would be messy. I had video and audio of his behavior with Charlene. I told him what I wanted, his resignation and my remodeling plans approved without interference. Fred agreed, saying he'd look into it, and I told him I'd wait until after the election before taking further action. Our relationship was permanently changed. From now on, he'd dread whenever I asked to see him. Another relationship ruined because of Charlie. The seminar happened, and I had the contractor handle the paperwork. Construction started the next day. Charlie seemed indifferent, likely preoccupied with other concerns. She tried to patch things up, telling me she was bored, felt unattractive, and was lonely with the kids growing up. She apologized, claiming she'd just made a mistake with someone who took advantage of her vulnerability. I responded, "What happens when the girls leave for college and you're bored again? You could have found purpose, volunteered, joined a book club, or worked. Instead, you chose to cheat. How's that working out?" I told her I wouldn't touch her. Our marriage was on life support and inevitable to fail. She ran out of the room, crying. In the following weeks, Charlie acted like the perfect wife and mother. We even took a family trip to Disney. But things soured when we went to bed. I rented a room with separate beds, making it clear we wouldn't share. She hinted at divorce, and when I handed her the separation papers, I knew a confrontation was coming. I picked up the girls early from school and took them to the park. They figured something was wrong, but didn't know who was at fault. I gently told them I was moving out. They cried and begged me to stay. I reassured them that I wasn't going far, and showed them the new apartment I'd set up in the basement. It wasn't as nice as their rooms, but it would always be there for them. They were excited to decorate it. When we got home, Charlie was livid, screaming at me. The neighbors called the police. I stayed outside, showing the officer the divorce papers and explaining the situation. I mentioned infidelity but didn't go into details. Charlie lashed out, but I kept my cool. The officer wisely asked her to stay outside while I showed him the apartment. When we opened the girls' room door, they were crying on the bed. I comforted them, assuring them their mother was just upset, but would calm down. The officer nodded and told the girls their mom was feeling better. Afterward, the officer told me I did the right thing for the kids and advised me to always put them first. When we returned, Charlie had calmed down and claimed her outburst was because of how much she loved me. The officer reiterated the importance of putting the children's well-being first and wished us both luck. Charlie waved at the officer as she left, then turned to me and hissed, "Living room now." She stormed inside, and I took the chance to lock myself in the house, putting deadbolts and latches on both doors. The new lower door was soundproof, so her screams wouldn't reach me. The girls stayed with me until bedtime, and I reassured them that their mom was fine. Before they returned, I called Charlie and said, "How you treat the girls now could affect your relationship with them later. Think about it." I hung up, and the night went smoothly. Charlie hired a lawyer, and we met in court. The judge, a tired woman in her 40s, asked why I filed for divorce. I explained that Charlie had been having an affair for 9 months, and when I found out, she refused to end it. I also mentioned that I couldn't expose our daughters to this lifestyle. I had video and audio evidence legally obtained to support my claims. The judge turned to Charlie, who hung her head. "You're going to need to make some decisions, Mrs. Sayers," she said. "If you want to save your marriage, reflect on your actions. For now, this is just a trial separation. You have 90 days to decide whether to reconcile or file for divorce." After the hearing, Charlie and I exchanged a few words in the parking lot. She said she felt sadness, not just anger. I always thought we'd part holding hands, she said, but now I know that won't happen. For the next 3 weeks, we lived separately, her upstairs, me downstairs. The girls refused to let her into my apartment, which upset Charlie. One day, I knocked on her door and asked her to follow my lead. The girls made dinner, and we all ate together. Charlie complimented their cooking and helped with cleanup. I showed her the apartment, and the girls adapted, having friends over on weekends. I built a pool, making our house even more popular. Some parents noticed our situation, but didn't comment, though a few hinted at interest, which annoyed Charlie. One night after a gathering, Charlie confronted me angrily. "What were you thinking? That woman climbed into your lap?" she yelled. I calmly replied, "How embarrassing would it be if your spouse were having an affair and everyone knew about it? I think that's worse." Charlie was taken aback, but I enjoyed seeing her squirm. I avoided contact with her afterward, though I still kept an eye on her through her phone and daily activities. It seemed she had 2 lovers but was left alone for months. It was sad, but also a bit amusing. After Charlie's release, she cried in her sleep, unaware I had put her phone on a wiretap. When a telemarketer called, she tried to fix it, thinking it was a sign things were improving between us, not realizing it was a signal of our marriage's end. The election was over, and the new county manager promised to clean up the budget. Bob was quietly let go after the commissioner saw the video I gave them. It showed him detailing what he planned to do to Charlie next time they met. They fired him without a recommendation, warning him he'd never work in local government again and might face legal charges. Charlie called, torn between anger and guilt. "Did you have to do that?" she asked. I replied, "He should have thought about this before sleeping with you, and his wife will be fine. She got a good job." Bob's wife, a sweet woman, was devastated. I offered her a job, saying, "It's not your fault he betrayed you, but I feel responsible. If you want to leave, I can help you. If you want to stay, I'll pray for you." She thanked me, still in shock. 3 days later, she called. Bob hadn't told her he'd been fired. When she confronted him, he nearly punched her, but she threatened to call the cops, and he ran. She'd cleared their accounts, but I made sure his kids had everything they needed. She asked if the job offer was still available. It was, and she started working for me the next week. She adapted quickly, working half in the office, half from home, which helped with her kids. My staff noticed the changes. Most expressed sympathy, but Misty, who hated Charlie, caused a scene at the company party. Afterward, I reprimanded Charlie for her behavior, especially since she had started her affair with Bob around that time. Charlie apologized, and Misty accepted. Misty later told me, "You're too good for her. She was always cruel to women when you weren't around." She hinted she'd take care of Charlie if it came to it, referencing her past job as a casino dealer. Misty was a confident, stylish redhead, 12 years younger than me, in a serious relationship with a good guy. I promised to walk her down the aisle and pay for the honeymoon, knowing she wasn't interested in me. One day, when we were alone, I joked around with her, asking if her rug matched the curtains. She giggled, then teased me back about liking smooth floors better. We both laughed, and it lightened my mood for the rest of the day. The other women at work noticed my shift in attitude. Misty must have shared the joke, because whenever I got moody, one of them would try to cheer me up. I realized things had gone too far when our 60-year-old secretary made a joke about hairy rugs. Meanwhile, Charlie was struggling, feeling isolated without a lover, husband, or real connection, except for lunch with friends. After I nearly ruined her best friend's marriage by revealing her affair, neither of them would even talk to her. A month later, Charlie showed up at my door begging for a conversation. I let her in, offered her a beer, and she asked what it was. I told her it was a special imported kind. She asked if I had turned violent. I joked about it, saying I preferred quality over quantity, and mentioned how the girls drank sodas and fruit juice. Charlie admitted she'd been drinking more wine lately to cope with the loneliness, but was trying to cut back. I asked her why she was lonely, suggesting she should go out and scratch an itch. She seemed surprised and asked if it bothered me. I told her it didn't, since we were legally separated, and I'd done the same when we were still together. She confessed she hadn't been with Bob in a while, and their relationship had ended. I reminded her that she gained a lot when she threatened to take everything from me if I didn't let her continue the affair. She started to cry, but I snapped at her to stop. She then told me what she wanted, me back. She missed our family, the closeness, the comfort. She begged for a fresh start. I let her cry on my shoulder before she left, asking for a hug, which I gave her. Later, Marissa and Darcy came downstairs discussing dinner options. They finally decided on a Creole dish, and I suggested they invite Charlie if she wanted to join. After a brief argument, they went out to get food, returning with a movie to watch in the man cave. After dinner, I enjoyed my black and blue salad with blackened steak and blue cheese, while the girls sampled everything, including my plate. Darcy finally gathered the courage to try alligator bites, which turned out pretty good. Afterward, we settled on the leather couch with both girls between us, just like old times. They picked a novel, and I couldn't stop laughing until Darcy nudged me to quiet down so they could enjoy it. Neither of them saw the ending. They both fell asleep, snuggled up to us. I glanced over to see Charlie quietly crying, trying not to wake Marissa. We kissed them goodnight and sent them home, saying I'd stay there for a while. Everyone, even Charlie, kissed me goodnight. As they left, I sat on the couch, wondering if I could ever trust Charlie again. What if she turned on me again? Would I be able to handle another betrayal? Sleep soon took over, and by morning I was still lying there. I took a shower while they finished the movie. Charlie was making an effort. She cooked my favorite meals and didn't complain when I turned down some of her invitations. Our relationship with the girls was improving, especially when school started and she took them shopping. I gave Marissa one of my cards, and Charlie used it frequently, but she didn't overspend. She was learning to stick to the budget I'd set. One day, Charlie asked for a favor. "I've been thinking," she said. "I want to get a job or volunteer. If I do, will you watch the girls?" I hugged her, impressed by her decision. She'd also been going to the gym and was getting back into her old shape. I supported her progress and even gave her extra money for workout gear and clothes. Charlie started volunteering for a major charity, helping with events like fun runs and galas. For the first few months, they were mostly on weekends, and I sometimes went with her. As the weather cooled, most events moved indoors and became more frequent at night. I still went to some, but balancing work and these events was draining, so I cut back to attending 1 out of 3. Charlie seemed frustrated, so I asked, "How would you feel if I dragged you to work with no sleep?" The second morning, she showed us photos from the events, and I didn't think much of it. I trusted her now, and the cameras were still in place, but I hadn't checked them in weeks. We were slowly rebuilding our trust, and I believed she was truly sorry. Then June called and invited us for the weekend. Charlie had a 2-day event, so we kissed her goodbye, wishing her luck. She declined an invitation to stay with us, saying she'd be too tired to drive the extra 35 miles. When we arrived, Harry greeted us, calling me an idiot when it comes to women. He told me Shauna was upset because I hadn't acted on signals she'd sent when things went wrong with Charlie. He also didn't understand why I hadn't just let Charlie go. I explained that I stayed with her for the kids, not wanting any scandal if I had full custody. Harry asked about Charlie, and I told him things were much better. She was more involved with the girls, volunteering and getting her finances in order. I hadn't moved back in with her yet, but I had hope for the future. Later, June pulled me aside to talk. She mentioned how they contributed heavily to charity, especially for tax write-offs, and that Charlie had approached them several times about her new job. June then told me about a black-tie charity event they had attended, where they saw Charlie backstage coordinating. As the night was ending, June showed me a picture of Charlie in a dress I hadn't seen before, standing next to a man. "David Duncan," June explained. "He's wealthy and goes to these events to meet women. He's very good at it. He even tried his tricks on me once or twice, but I wasn't interested." I had a sinking feeling about where this was going. I took advantage of the situation, showed Harry the picture, and we blended into the crowd of 500. Most people were in tuxedos and dresses, and we got a few more pictures, some of them a bit inappropriate. "That's why we wanted you here," Harry said. "We didn't want you making the same mistake again." Unlike most people who would stay silent and offer sympathy later, they were real friends, speaking up to give me time to think. I nodded, lost in thought. The first betrayal had hurt, but this one, after everything, cut deep. My marriage was over. I thanked Harry and June, then went to bed, though I figured I'd be up all night. But once my head hit the pillow, I passed out. By 6 a.m., I was awake, contemplating my next move. The divorce was definitely back on. I'd call the lawyer on Monday and figure out how to tell Charlie and the girls. I'll stay in the basement until Marissa graduates. Maybe Darcy will move in with me, I thought. If Charlie had any sense, she'd agree for the girls' sake, but she doesn't. Time will tell. The next 2 days were spent enjoying time with the girls, though we joined in on the activities. June had decided she wanted horses, so they built a barn filled with 6 horses known for their gentle nature. Harry discovered he was allergic, so June, the girls, Shanna, and I rode around the neighborhood. For lunch, June had planned a picnic by their pond, which could have been a small lake. Harry met us with fishing rods, and I fished for a while before heading back. We practiced catch and release, enjoying the fight the base gave us. While fishing, we talked business. I owed my company to Harry and June. It all started when June mentioned her dry skin, and I, a civil engineer, had the idea to create a special shower wall with pulsating nozzles that washed, massaged, and applied lotion. It turned out to be not only practical, but also very pleasant. Women who tried it loved it, and June shared it with her friends. Eventually, they asked me to build more, and Harry loaned me money to start a business. I rented a workshop and hired 2 guys. We built custom shower walls, and word spread quickly. High-profile clients, including actors and former first ladies, placed orders. Within 2 years, we expanded to luxury hotels and professional sports teams, building larger units for locker rooms. Harry and June helped me secure international patents, and we even sued competitors in France and Portugal, gaining their assets. When it came time for my divorce, Harry shielded the company from Charlie's influence. I wasn't angry enough to destroy her, but I wasn't going to reward her either. I sold the company to Harry, making a profit and staying on as a manager with a great salary. Everything was transparent and life moved forward. In the divorce, I offered Charlie 60% of our assets in exchange for waiving alimony and child support. I calculated the costs with my new salary and set aside that amount in an escrow account for the kids' needs. I gave her a house worth $800,000 after the girls turned 18, with all utility bills paid until then, unless she remarried. My lawyer thought I was being too generous, but I told him I was thinking of the kids, not Charlie, and he dropped it. In the end, she got the house and $2.6 million. A deal hard to refuse. But she did. I watched on security cameras as she opened the papers at the dining room table. The first was the divorce petition. The second was a picture of her with her new lover. I left her a note. I was ready to forgive you, Charlie. I thought you had learned your lesson. But I was wrong. I'm offering you a generous deal, and you'll come out ahead. Just sign the papers, and we'll move on. No need to fight for custody. Share it until the kids are adults. I'll stay in the apartment until Marissa turns 18, and Darcy can decide where to live. Take the papers to your lawyer, and don't make this harder than it needs to be. It won't benefit you to drag this out. Good luck with your future relationships, just don't use me as a reference. I also sent her the same pictures I'd given my lawyer, the ones I gave to his wife. Be careful. This is an attachment alienation state, and a good lawyer can take most of your settlement. Let's hope she's not too harsh. Charlie begged, pleaded, and begged again, but it wasn't working. Please, Charlie, don't read me excuses from the cheater's handbook. You wanted another man and you got him. I'm not your backup plan. It's over. Let's not make things harder for the kids. Just sign the papers. In a few years, when the kids are older, we'll barely see each other. She cried, then got angry. Her lawyer, a tough negotiator, advised me to accept the deal and move on. You've got the evidence, and Charlie's been unfaithful twice. It's not a no-fault state, and if you press charges for infidelity, she'll end up with much less. Charlie countersued for mental cruelty, claiming I had affairs with Shanna and Brenda, Bob's ex-wife. Brenda threatened a defamation lawsuit, and Shanna showed up at Charlie's door warning her to stop. It won't be me, witch, Shanna said. I have some powerful friends who can make your life miserable. You could disappear. Think with your head, not your A. Charlie, now visibly shaken, backed down. One more thing. After this is over, I'm going after him. He's everything I want, strong, gentle, and kind. I'll have beautiful children with him and build the life I've always dreamed of, just so you know. A few weeks later, I was surprised when a woman I didn't know showed up at work. She said it was about my divorce. After I started recording, I invited her in. I'm Barbara Duncan, she said. I believe you know my husband. He's the one who's been having an affair with Charlie. I shook her hand. I'm sorry for what's happened, Mrs. Duncan. It's not my fault, and I'm sure it's not yours either. Barbara asked for help. I hear you have photos and evidence that could be useful in my divorce. Can you share them with me? Give me your lawyer's name and I'll send them over. She explained that her husband had emptied their bank accounts, leaving her with only enough for a house and clothes for their son. She wasn't working, and her future looked uncertain. Once again, I had to clean up the mess Charlie made. I called John and set up a meeting for Barbara. John, I've got another client for you. Charlie's wife. Give me a time and I'll send her over. And by the way, I'm paying, so give me a discount. Sure thing, John replied. Send her number. Text her when you're free. I turned to Barbara, who seemed shocked. Don't worry, he's good at what he does, and I can afford it. It's the least I can do for you. If you need anything else, just ask. She tried not to cry, but couldn't help it. I handed her tissues and let her cry for a while. Brenda was at her place, and I figured she would understand Barbara's pain. I called Brenda, and she came into my office. I introduced them. You two have something in common. My wife has been with both of your husbands. I'll be out for a bit. I left them alone for 15 minutes. When I returned, both women had me sitting on the couch, and then they kissed me. I didn't expect that. Barbara spoke first. I told Brenda what a nice guy you are, and when my divorce is final, I'm coming for you. I was taken aback. You're my hero. Now focus, she continued. Barbara needs a job. She's got a degree in international business relations, speaks French, Italian, and German. Perfect fit for that marketing position you mentioned. Brenda grinned. You can thank me with a big bonus in my next paycheck. And remember, I'm your chief accountant, so don't even think about lowballing her. Charlie was furious when he found out. Is this revenge? You're treating me like crap while helping these women? I held up my hand. I've reached my limit with you. Charlie snapped. What's your problem? Charlie, shut up. Are you listening? If you don't, this deal is off, and I'll make you fight for every penny. You really think when I married you, I'd end up supporting the women you destroyed? I continued coldly. This is on you, and I'm done. Don't talk to me again. If you do, talk to my lawyer. The girls will tell me if they need anything. She cried again, but I was firm. The divorce is happening. Before the ink's dry, I'll be moving on. The girls need a good role model, not you. Go ruin some other marriage. When you're done, send the wrecked women to me, and I'll try to fix them. Maybe they can start a support group. I've got plenty of experience. Goodbye, Charlie, I said, and left without even closing the door. The girls hated the situation. I tried to shield them, but they eventually found out. They didn't see Charlie for 3 weeks until I convinced them to spend a weekend away. She's still your mother. She loves you. I'm sure not seeing you is hurting her. It's going to be tough, but do it for the family. Darcy, looking older than her 11 years, sighed. We'll go, but you're wrong, Papa. She betrayed us. We'll never have the same family again. She hugged me tightly before walking away. Love you, Daddy. When did kids get so wise and world-weary? I might need therapy, for all of us. It took 11 months and cost Charlie $600,000 before she finally gave up. She asked for an hour before signing the papers, so I called her. What could you say that would make a difference? If you're sorry, I accept your apology. Otherwise, sign the papers. I'm done with the drama. Darcy was 12 and a half now and growing into a beautiful young woman. Marissa, almost 15, looked like a model. The pool and man cave parties still happened, but Charlie never came. I was still paying for the house until Junior went to college. I updated the divorce terms. The house would be sold and the proceeds split. Charlie would still have enough to live comfortably if she managed her money. Before the ink was even dry on the divorce papers, Brenda, true to her word, came after me. I tried to gently put her off. I'd love to, Brenda, I said, but you work for me. If we don't work out, it could get really awkward. I'll quit, she replied without hesitation. I raised an eyebrow. You'll send your resignation email in about 5 seconds, I teased. I laughed, but she wasn't deterred. You love your job, I continued, and no one will pay you as well as I do. Brenda smirked. I could marry a banker. I shot back. You could, but that might take a while if it happens at all. Please stop, she said, laughing. I knew she was flying to France the next day. Maybe you'll meet a Frenchman there. There's a Pierre Jean-Claude out there looking for you. Brenda found a new guy, another accountant, and they're still keeping track of his performance, how many minutes he lasts, how many peaks he can deliver. So far, it's adding up. Barbara took my offer seriously, found a Frenchman, and moved to Nice to run the European division. C'est la vie. I muddled through for about 9 months. I dated a few women I met through friends and events, but other than some physical pleasure, nothing clicked. Harry and Jane looked after me, and I spent time with the girls when I could. Shanna left, saying she loved them but needed to move on. It was a little disappointing, but the girls smirked. 13 months after the divorce, Charlie got engaged to a guy she met through her charity work. After her affair came to light, the charity suggested she could be more useful elsewhere, and she took the hint. I met the new guy a few times. He seemed decent, and at least he was single when they met. I didn't know how truthful Charlie had been about her past. But that wasn't my problem. The girls liked him, and he wasn't trying to play dad. Sometimes he took them out to the movies while their mom worked. and I was glad to see they were adjusting well. Then one day, the girls came home upset. Josh had broken off the engagement. "Why?" I asked. "Really, Dad? It's Mom." "What do you think happened?" I'd gotten used to it enough that I didn't get disgusted by Charlie anymore. We could be civil, but I didn't encourage her. I had taken down all the surveillance equipment. It was no longer my business. But when Josh showed up, I almost considered turning it back on. I wondered if she was still making those same faces and noises during closeness with him. Thankfully, I didn't give in. 17 months after the divorce, I came home to find Shanna sitting on my couch. She'd stopped by to see the girls. Marissa, now 16, had just gotten her milestone car, a 4-wheel drive Jeep. She picked it herself, a safer choice than most cars teenage girls want. I agreed, even though I suspected it had something to do with Shanna's influence. When Shanna was younger, she had a car just like it. Darcy ran up to me, excitement written all over her face. "Daddy, guess what? Shanna wants to take us camping. Can we go?" I was surprised. Darcy, the girl who wouldn't think of getting dirty, wanted to camp? Shanna grinned at me, knowing I was confused. "You're seriously going camping?" I teased. "I haven't seen you in almost 2 years. And this is how you come back? Hijack my kids and leave me abandoned?" Shanna laughed. "You can come too. I'll probably need help managing all the girls. I'm taking Darcy, Marissa, Star, and a couple of their friends. 9 girls, ages 10 to 16. It might be beyond me." I shook my head, smiling. "You can handle it. You always did, like running a military camp. But sure, I'll help carry stuff and cook." I ordered pizza while they browsed expensive camping gear online. I had a feeling this trip would cost me. Shanna checked in every few days to make sure the girls had everything, even teaching them how to set up tents blindfolded. Star was with her often, already showing signs of being as sharp as her parents and looking like her mother. I hadn't spoken to Charlie in months. She'd been dating other men and sent the girls to my place when she had dates. I wasn't thrilled, but the girls seemed okay with it. One day, Charlie called, wanting to talk about the girls. I knew this wasn't going to be good. She came over, got straight to the point. "Stop turning my girls against me. I'm sick of hearing about Shanna. She can do this. She can do that." I had to hold back my anger, but eventually found my voice. I couldn't help but laugh. "And this is coming from a woman who's had a parade of lovers the past few months? You think they're too stupid to notice? Hypocrite." I paused, then added, "You need to take care of yourself, Charlie. Get back to the gym. Do something with your hair. Do it for the girls, at least." "Anything else?" I asked. She shot me a glare and left. As I walked away, Shanna pulled up. The girls ran out, cheering when they saw her. It was amusing to see Charlie's face turn red. "Why did you do that?" she asked. I smiled. "I've always wanted to, and believe me, it was better than I imagined." Honestly, it felt good to surprise her. As the girls set the table with salads, I prepared the steaks and baked potatoes. After dinner, the girls rushed inside, leaving me to clean up. I double-checked Shanna's list. How could something this complicated be fun? Shanna loaded Star and her friends into her 4-wheeler, Marissa did the same with hers, and Darcy and her friends took their own. It was crowded. I was driving the support truck, loaded with gear. Shanna said it would take 4 hours to get there, but it was worth it. We were completely isolated, with the bathhouse 30 minutes away. If anyone needed to go sooner, they'd have to imitate a bear. Shanna took charge, and before long, 4 tents appeared. I was told to store the food in bear-proof containers, which didn't exactly reassure me. The coolers were locked in the cars, and Shanna sprayed bear repellent around the tents and vehicles. Then I assembled the grill. By lunchtime, everything was ready, and the girls were giggling while putting on swimsuits. I drove back to the marina, got the keys for a huge pontoon boat, and had an hour-long briefing. It was designed for 18 adults, so 9 girls and 2 adults wouldn't be a problem. The next morning, Shanna took over breakfast duties, leaving me to chop vegetables for an omelet. She made amazing pancakes with buckwheat flour and fresh blueberries. After breakfast, we all helped clean up, and Shanna took the girls fishing. The lake had lots of small bream, so everyone caught something. We took photos, and the girls joked about shopping for gear soon. After lazing around, we went back to the marina for lunch. The girls wore sneakers over their swimsuits, thinking we were going to a restaurant. Oddly, the place served Italian food, and we shared spaghetti, ravioli, and meatballs. Afterward, we admired boats at the pier. The girls squealed when they realized the big boat was for them, but groaned when Shanna made them put on life jackets. "We have a student driver," Shanna joked. Better safe than sorry. We set off slowly, and I heard Shana laughing on deck. The girls were relaxed, and we anchored in a cove with a shallow beach. The boat had a sliding board, and the girls took turns flying into the water. One girl, Vicky, couldn't swim, but Shana made sure she had a life jacket and took her into the water. Everyone roasted sausages and marshmallows on the shore while Shana quietly talked to Vicky. After a while, I kissed Shana's cheek. Her smile lit up the evening. "For helping Vicky," I said. "You're going to be an amazing mom." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she swam off to the bay. I helped the girls clean up and made sure the fire was out. We slowly swam back to the dock, and Shana asked if she had upset me. I told her she hadn't, just that her compliment took me by surprise. We had a light dinner the girls made, and Shana and I relaxed in camp chairs, snuggling. She told me about her new job co-owning a security firm. I told her I'd sold my company, which surprised her. "It didn't bother me," I said. "I got into it to help a friend. Harry and June dragged me into it, and while I appreciated the loyalty, it wasn't my passion. I just wanted enough money to provide for my family, and later, for my girls." Shana squeezed my hand. "I know you don't show it, but Charlie hurt you. I've been there too. My ex-husband left me for a pregnant woman, my supposed friend. At least he waited until I got home, but it still hurt." I was a bit surprised. Shana had never mentioned her past before, and it made me feel a little sad. Charlie had taught me how to handle pain, so I understood where she was coming from. We relaxed in the chairs until dinner was ready. I was glad my girls knew how to use the grill. Most of the others were clueless. After dinner, Shana and I did the dishes while the girls sang around the fire. It was peaceful, no one around to appreciate their talent. The girls insisted we get a pontoon for birthdays combined, and I didn't argue. That night, I lay in the tent, realizing I was the happiest I'd been in a long time. I fell asleep with a smile, and the next morning we packed up, making sure we had left the campground cleaner than we found it. As we drove home, Shana and I held hands in silence. About an hour from home, she finally broke the quiet. "I've been thinking about this for years," she said, her voice serious. "Here's the deal. You'll marry me, have more kids, and spend your life with me. If you don't want that, I'll leave, and you'll never see me again. Oh, and by the way, I love you. How do you feel about that?" I paused for a moment, pretending to consider it. "Let me think about it," I teased. Shana gave me a pointed look. "Okay, I've thought about it. Tomorrow we'll pick a ring, and you'll go house hunting. I'm not starting married life in my ex's basement. Oh, and will you marry me?" She waited, but then tears started to flow. The smug smile returned as she quickly texted someone. Marissa, who was driving another car behind us, pulled over in shock. Shana jumped out, pulled me into a hug, and I saw Marissa's message flash on Shana's phone. "Operation successful. Great job, troops." "Oops, you weren't supposed to see that," Marissa said, blushing and hugging me again. I sighed and closed my computer, realizing today was my 60th birthday, my last day of work. I was retiring, having made good money, and it was time. Darcy was working with Harry, learning the business to eventually take over as CEO. Marissa, an engineer specializing in bridge construction, had found a life partner and adopted 2 little girls, my only grandchildren. Darcy was still married to her work, but seemed close to an engineer she met through her sister. Just then, Shana walked in with our twin daughters, soon to graduate high school and go to different colleges. Shana had been right. Our children were beautiful, and they were starting to take their own paths. Shana retired on our wedding day to run her company, then sold her share when she found out she was pregnant. My company had grown with Harry's empire, and their insights often changed business strategies. Shana stopped at our wedding photo, where she and June stood with 9 bridesmaids, all in floor-length dresses and combat boots, holding a sign that read, "Operation Successful." We were headed home to the lake, where we had spent many vacations. 2 pontoons and a speedboat sat at the dock, and the guys from our trip often visited, talking about Operation Lake. Privacy was a rare commodity, but we were used to it. As for Charlie, the house went to her, and she wasn't happy about it. But soon, she realized her complaints weren't going to change anything. What really upset her was that Shana bought a house just a block away. A $500,000 home with a pool and hot tub, and it was written about in magazines. The first year of custody was easy since the girls lived close, though they preferred to stay with us, especially after their sisters were born. Charlie married twice more, but both ended badly. Her first marriage ended because of cheating, and the second fizzled out after a few years. Brenda and Barb even tracked down her second wife and offered her a job. We still see Charlie occasionally. She's quieter now, still holding on to old resentments. Time hasn't been kind to her, and her habits haven't changed. She still prefers the mall to the gym. "Dad, hurry up," one of the girls called. "If we leave now, we'll have time to swim at the lake." I grinned, grabbed my box, and walked out with my family, ready to start the next chapter of my life.